while I talk to Rex for a couple of minutes as she preps her stream. Rex for a couple of minutes as
There
she
we go. Okay, I think I'm live now.
minutes as
There
she.
we go.
Okay.
Okay, I think
Alrighty.
I'm live now.
Then we are going to raid out to Rex 73, where we're going to have our normally scheduled destruction discussion.
Destruction of social
Destruction.
norms.
Yes.
All right, let me just post this in my Discord quickly so everyone gets the info. And then we'll start up.
Why will it not let me raid out to you? This is bizarre. Let me do it from my actual channel.
Hopefully my sound and everything is okay. I should text.
So weird. It won't let me raid out, but I will. So I'll still end my stream and then I'll just host you if this raid doesn't work the way
Okay,
it's supposed to.
that sounds good.
All right, it says invalid target. So I'm going to end stream here for everybody that tuned in. Thank you. And I'm going to join Rex over on her channel, which you can find at Rex73 underscore. And I'm going to host her so that way anybody that's here will just be able to be pointed straight away. So my stream is now over. And now I am present with you. How are you tonight, Rex?
Good, how are you doing?
I am doing well.
Oh.
It's been a productive week.
Yeah, been streaming a lot?
It has. I have been streaming quite a bit.
Yeah, you were streaming almost all day today. I was like in and out a couple of times during just between work and stuff like that.
Yes. But now I am here and I'm willing to listen to what topics. Well, listen to you. Tell us what topic we will be talking about tonight.
Okay. I think tonight we're probably going to focus on gender, sexuality, dating, and just general socialization, especially in like the new world with media, with online dating, all that type of stuff. I think it's really interesting how dynamics have changed. And I also, you're a little bit older, so it's kind of cool to get a different perspective on how you feel about that. So yeah.
I'm ready to wherever you want to start. I'm ready to pick up. Let's go.
Okay. I think I want to open this up just with like a few general questions, kind of like more personal stuff, if you're okay talking about that. Not super personal, just kind of general questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm fine with it.
Okay, cool. I guess the first question is like, do you identify sexually or like your gender or your sexuality like different than just the norm?
So for me, as the person in this world, and not like the video game avatar that people are typically familiar with, I identify as traditionally like I'm biologically male, and I identify as gendered male, so cisgendered like biological male. That's my identification. And as far as like my sexual preferences go, in terms of what I would look for in a partner, I'm also traditionally heterosexual. So interested in those who would identify as primarily biologically female, but female in on whole is where I lean. But I'm also, I'm open and accepting to everybody else's preferences, right? Because I believe that, and this is getting off into the weeds already, but like love is a very universal concept. So if you love somebody that is similar to you or different, like it doesn't matter as long as it's something that's mutually like accepted between the two, right? Like who am I to tell people like, oh, you have to do it a certain way because there's a book that says that it must be so.
Caveating, as long as it's all legal and everyone can
Yes,
consent.
and legal, and legal. That's key.
That's key. There we go. One caveat. Hello, Metamodal, for jumping in. Yeah, okay. I guess like the other question I wanted to ask, like, are you in a relationship currently? And if not, like when was like the last like kind of like are you dating or are you in like were you in a relationship like recently? Like kind of what's your
So
dating outlook right now?
so my last relationship was probably about like 2 years ago. And I'm not currently. I'm a bit of a workaholic, and right now, like in the present era, I'm dedicating myself almost entirely to streaming,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm kind of in a sense like married to my community. And for me, like there's that human want of having like a romantic partner, but with how much I dedicate to what I do and how little I'd be able to like focus on that person in the way that they would appreciate and deserve
Mm-hmm.
would be unfair because I can't offer that to them. So I choose it is my choice to be like perpetually single for the time being.
Okay. That's cool. I can respect that. I think I was like that for a long time, especially early university and stuff. And I was super independent like growing up, and I'm still super independent. So the whole dating and relationship things were super hard for me to like open up to anyone or get close to anyone in that sense, and also to like put enough time out of my life for someone else because I was like so independent that I like everything was like very like narrowed on my life and what I'm doing, and maybe not always in the best ways, but it was also very good for me for like growth and like coming into my own person. But it also did like cut off a lot of those like pathways for me in general.
Yeah. And I was also similar when I was in university. I think while I was in university, I did have one like there were two there was a pseudo relationship where we mutually enjoyed each other's company, and there was a sense of profound love but not like romantic interest. And
Mm-hmm.
then there was like the real romantic relationship that occurred later on in that part of my life. It was one of the best experiences that I had, but it ultimately like we we met where they were an international student and
Mm,
I'm from the States, and their life was going to take them away from the States. Like no matter what, like their future was already set in stone. So unless like I wanted to make that jump and that sacrifice, which I wasn't ready to, nor did I want to, is it was not going to work. And so we just kind of saw it for what it was. But it did like kind of deter me from my studies. Like I definitely saw like taking the focused effort away from my schoolwork and pouring some of it into a relationship was a bit detrimental to my marks. But I
yeah,
wouldn't trade having like give I wouldn't
that
give up that
experience.
experience. Yeah.
Yeah,
In exchange for like a 4.0 GPA or something crazy.
the people that come into your life who like it may have deterred like the education, but like it made such a good impact on your life overall that like you would never get rid of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
And
fair.
it's like, for all that we know, this is the only shot that we got at this deal, right? Like, there are subjects of reincarnation and all of those other philosophical things that we talk
Mm-hmm.
about. But I'm like, hey, it's like this is the moment that's happening now. And I can't bank that it's going to occur again in the future. So I may as well just like indulge this opportunity while it's before me.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I guess like so you said your last like like how long did that relationship last?
Was off and on for I don't know like 6 or 7 months. It
Okay.
was not a healthy relationship,
Mm,
to say the least. It, we had a physical attraction, and that's where it ended. Like there was nothing beyond that, and they were like very dishonest. There were a lot of red flags, and like I'm not a perfect person either, so I accept blame where my blame is due. But
mm-hmm.
we should have realized right away that beyond what we were initially invested into with each other, like there was nothing else, and that pursuing something and trying to force that thing into being was not going to be healthy for either of us.
Yeah, I've definitely seen like relationships like that where it's like there's like super strong physical attraction and like they're going at it every night except like during the day they like cannot stand each other. And it's like this can't be healthy. This can't be something you want for the rest of your life. But it's really sometimes for a lot of people it's really hard to get over that boundary, especially when you are so attracted to that person. Like it can blind you a little bit to the rest of it.
It's happened. I mean, that was I was definitely like from the romantic aspect, and the stereotype is love makes you blind, and I wasn't in love, but definitely full of like desire for this individual. it did like make me ignorant of kind of everything that was around me because I was just really, really concerned about like what was going on in the moment with that person. But
Mm-hmm.
looking back, as like, yeah, I should have got out of it a long time ago. Like when I felt like in my gut, and we were talking about like the significance of a gut feeling. There was like a point that just was like with vivid clarity was like get out, and I was like no.
No, I'm
And
gonna ignore that. Yeah, no, the for sure. I think a lot of people. I don't think like you're the first, and you won't be the last to. I think most people, like especially when it comes to relationships, when you're so infatuated with someone, it's really hard to like take that gut feeling at what it is because you're like, man, I really like this person. I really want this person, and nothing is gonna sway you off that. Um,
the unfortunate circumstance, beauty, and tragedy of being human.
True. Michelle said it's really hard to stand a person you cannot connect with intellectually or emotionally, for sure. But like, sometimes I know I've been in those situations where I'm like, I have no attraction to you in any other aspect of my life, but holy crap, you are so pretty that I just want to be around you.
Right?
Oh my god, and I like, and again, I didn't date those people because I think I'm someone who needs to be like really like intellectually and like that sounds like super pretentious, but like intellectually stimulated in a sense because I'm like I need to be able to have like I have these conversations with everyone I'm around. So like this conversation I'm having with you on stream, the reason my friends push me to stream is because like they're like I think most of them just cannot deal with how much I want to have conversations all the time, except for like I have one friend who I do this with all the time, and like he's on the stream a lot because he's the one person who can like do it with me, and like no one else can stand how much I'm like this.
Yeah, and I'm not saying anything in agreeing with your own take on yourself or your friends' perceptions, but I relate to it because I'm a very chatty individual.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy very deep and well-founded conversations, but it's exhausting for other people, and it's
Oh, for
not for
sure.
any lack of their capacity, but more so just like their life and their
I
patience. Right?
don't
It's
think
it's
most
not something.
people are adept to like have that level of like constant, really hard engagement 24/7 and like not turn it off. And I think the only reason I'm like that is because like I have a family who's like that. Like my family loves to get super political. Like Christmas Day is like not Christmas Day without having like some big political but like no one in my family fights over it. Like we're all like on different ends and we'll all talk about it. We love to debate, but it's really healthy debate to the point that like none of us get mad at each other. It's never like combative like you're trying to like dig at the other person like oh you're wrong or whatever. It's like we will all like debate our own points and like we love to do that. So I grew up in that environment, but like I don't think everyone could do it. So like even when it came to dating, it was like if you can't keep up with me in that sense, then you're gonna have a bad time.
Yeah, and that's another reason too, where like it relates back to me just choosing to be a single individual. Is because when it comes to relationships, I am at best like a middling like partner. I am receptive, I am caring, I listen, and I do nurture the relationship. But I'm a much better friend, way better friend, like
Mm-hmm.
way more devoted to friendship, and that causes problems because it's like when you have a circle of friends and you spend a lot of time with them and you love them all
Mm-hmm.
because they mean a great deal to you. When you have someone who is like romantically interested on you and wants your focus, something's got to give.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's them because I'm like I'm not going to sacrifice all of these other individuals for your sake. Like I will include you
Mm-hmm.
if you want to be included and you have to actively want to be a part of this circle. But if you're going to remove me from it, then this is where it ends.
Yeah, I'm definitely the same way. Like I have a really really like close tight knit group of friends, and if like whoever I'm dating can't get along with that group of friends, then like they're out because I'm like I spend too much time. I don't have a lot of time anyway to be social. I also don't have a lot of energy to be super social. Like I'm super talkative on stream and especially with you, but it's like we're talking once a week. I like can't be around people 24/7. I'm not one of those people who can like I need a lot of alone time. I need a lot of downtime to myself. I'm very like a bit of a loner that way in that sense. But when it comes to like if I have like 3 days a week that I can like take out to like hang out with people, see people, and do things that isn't like schoolwork or running my own shit, then like sometimes that's gonna overlap with like whoever I'm dating. Like maybe we're all gonna go out with my friends and like we're gonna go grab dinner and stuff like that and like all hang out. And then you and me might hang out like later, like after, like maybe later than the rest of my friends, but like it's still like you need to be able to get along with those people in my life because they are so ingrained in like my day to day life a lot of times.
Yeah, and those are typically the people that remain like
Mm-hmm.
throughout all the times when when you're Twitter pated, right? To take from Bambi, and you run off and you're in love or you're in lust or whatever it is, and you disappear and you fall off the grid. For me and the experience as a whole, like when shit happens and it goes bad, and even if they warn me about it, or if they just bite their tongue because they would just rather let me make my own decisions and live with my like learn from my own mistakes when it's over and done with, like they like when the storm is cleared, like they are there, like they are the stalwart like foundation that remains. And
Mm-hmm.
for me to ever be like, no, like I'm just gonna leave you all for this person, like I've made that mistake before, and it was thankfully those people have cared about me and loved me enough to be like, we understand, like we've
Mm-hmm.
all done something stupid like this for the sake of being overly interested in another person.
For sure.
But hope but like they're there, and I'm like, and that's made me even more loyal to them and love them in a more unconditional sense, like the true universal love, which is the topic that I really enjoy,
Yeah.
because I'm like so that speaks of their love of me as a person, is that like even after that, like
You
they
can still go
remain.
back to them, yeah. Yeah, Metamoto said in the chat, I dated one girl who would vapidly narrate her Tumblr feed to me as a substance of her. Oh lord, that would turn me off so quick. Lasted like 2 weeks. It's quite unique. I've made a mistake of forsaking my friends and just having it blow up in my face before. I'm a hopeless romantic though, because that's the kind of world I strive to build. That's yeah. I think if you have a solid group of friends, they'll probably be annoyed that you like pieced out to like go hang out with your like significant other for a long time. But if you ever come back to them, like your friends will always take you back in. Like 99% of the times, if your friends are like they still care about you, they'll like know you're making stupid decisions, and then like once it blows up in your face, like you can go back and like kind of be like, yeah, I fucked up.
Yep. And they're like, yeah, we know, and you didn't listen to us, but we still love you
Yeah,
anyway.
we told you this like very early on, but you ran with it, so it is what it is.
Yeah.
I don't think I've had anything that crazy. I've had like maybe like one or two off situations where my friends like, why would you do that? But I've never had like super long relationships like in the like and like when I was like early on dating, I didn't like I had like a couple flings. I didn't date for most of a lot of times. I like this is kind of what I want to go into is like online dating. So I did like the whole Tinder thing for quite a while, and I like loved like flirting and chatting around. I was a huge flirt. Like I loved just like having that attention and like just playing around. But I was like really straight up with people. I was like never like, oh, I'm like, let's see where this goes. I'm always like, hey, I'm just here for a good time. This isn't gonna go into anything serious. Like, know that right off the bat. Like, I'm just here to like have some fun. And like, if I got into a guy enough, like I'd hook up. But I don't think I ever hooked up with anyone off Tinder. I went on a couple of dates with this one guy, but he was also like, it would have been long distance. He was like in my town for a little bit. And then like yeah, that was pretty much like the extent of like my time on Tinder for like the first 2 years of my university. But like the only stupid things I ever did there was probably like go off on like sketchy dates or like my friends would all get really mad at me because like I would be like I'm going out with this guy and they're like okay cool and I'm like he's picking me up and they're like stop getting into random dudes cards because I had a really bad habit of like anytime I wanted to ride somewhere it was always like a guy would like I would be talking to this guy or like meeting someone at university and I'd know them for like 10 minutes and be like and he's like oh do you want to ride I'm like yeah sure let's go home.
Let's go.
Let's go. I'm like, I don't want
This
to bust down the mountain. Sure, take me to the SkyTrain. Let's go get
Where
like,
is this? This doesn't. Are you sure we're going in the right direction? Yes, we are,
yeah.
baby.
And it's happened like on like several occasions. So my friends are like, I don't know how you're not dead, but please stop doing this. I'm like, yeah, but I've had such good luck. Like, nothing's ever happened.
Your
Like,
RNG will eventually fail.
yeah, I was like, but like statistically, I'm like 7 for 7 of being like alive, and they're like, okay, that one time out of 10 that was gonna get you.
Right?
And I was like, well, I guess we'll see. We'll find out.
Just keep rolling them dice. We'll see what
Big
happens.
dumb dumb. Yeah, Rams yelled at me a lot for that. I think the only other time I got like yelled at is because like I went out with this guy and then he lived like a couple like not a couple hours but like because I was like using public transit at that point he lived like quite a bit of ways, and so I like public transited to go meet up with him go on a date and my parents were like out of town so I like took the SkyTrain out there and then it was getting super late and I was like oh I should probably go home and he's like oh why don't you come up to my place. I'm like well the train's gonna stop running and then he's like it's fine you can just stay over and I was like fuck I'm like if my parents find out I'm fucked but I do kind of want to go back with this guy so I like went and I called my friend and I was like yeah, so I'm like staying at this guy's place tonight, and she's like, "You're what?" And then I was like, "Okay, cool. As long as you know where I am, my location's on. Bye. Gotta go." And then she was like texting me like so. I was like, "It's fine. Don't worry." Nothing happened. Obviously, I'm here and fine today. It was all good, but
Yes.
it was just like, yeah.
Unless
I think that was like the
this
extent of my stupid like dating decisions.
it happens. Yeah, but that's how you learn to make smarter decisions in the
Hmm.
future is hopefully like nothing tragic happens to anybody during their experiences. But like you have to be a big dum dum to become a little bit smarter
Yeah.
later about it. Hopefully you become smarter about it as not just you, but like as that generalized you that's out there. Um,
I think it's like one
but
of
yeah,
those things like you have to be really careful, especially like for girls out there dating and stuff. Like I would always be smart. Like if I didn't know the guy, if this was like my first time meeting up, it was always like a public place. I never like met up with anyone in private. Like I never went to somebody's house on a first date kind of thing, or I didn't like invite them over on a first date. It was always like, okay, we're gonna meet up somewhere public. We're gonna go like hang out for a few hours and see what like the vibe is, and like get to know a person. I would never just like. I think I was smart in that way. Other than like the getting into people's car, I think that was like the stupidest thing I did. But it was never like somebody who like was so weird and random that it felt like it was dangerous. It was always like people I met at university or like people I had known for a little bit. And so like I think that since I was smart, like I never like did anything stupid when it came to like going on dates and stuff and like when it was like assessing people. But I think some people like are really trusting in those situations. So like a girl will be like the guy will be like, "Oh, hey, why don't you come over and like we'll have dinner at my place." I'm like, "Don't do that. Don't do that on a first date. Don't go to a guy's place because you're giving him all the power in that situation." And like he might be a totally nice guy, but if he's not, you're really fucked.
yes, absolutely. Where and you can be a prisoner at that point, so to
Yeah.
speak. So yes, always be super cautious about that, especially like overly kind, overly generous. Like my lesson in life that I've learned personally is that when people are giving you everything you want right away, there are ulterior motives behind
Mm-hmm.
it, and you need to discern what they are immediately.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Like, do, like, the love bombing thing is, I've seen it happen to people where, like, people just get, like, crazy love bombed, but then the guy's, like, or, like, one of the people, like, sometimes it happens the other way, too, where I've seen, like, a girl, she'll, like, be all over this guy, like, and she's, like, she knows she's hot, too, so, like, the guy's, like, super into her, and then, like, we'll push him into doing, like, sexual things that he's, like, either not ready for, or, like, he's not there yet, and it's, like you got to be really careful with that because now you're like unwilling to say no because this person is like showing you so much affection or giving you so many gifts that you don't want to like reject them because you feel like they've been too nice to you. And especially if you're like an
Yeah,
emotional person, like I don't think that would work on me just because like I'm one of those people like if I give you things I don't expect anything back, so if you give me things don't expect anything back. But if you are that type of person who like can be guilted pretty easily, then you have to be really careful.
yeah, and I mean that's those are a couple of things that happen in courting and in relationships. Sometimes you have those like you referenced love bombing and people who are very generous, but they're not gift giving. They are facilitating an exchange and they
Mm-hmm.
bring it up. Like that's where it's like there are people who genuinely give you gifts and you're like, "Oh, why did you do this?" Like, "Oh, like because I like you.
Mm-hmm.
Like I care
Oh, I
about
saw it.
you.
I
I'm
thought
giving
about
you
it.
this." Yeah, like I was thinking about you. Like
Yeah.
literally that's it. And then you have the people who are like, "Remember that one time that I took you out to dinner and I got the bill and then we went out afterwards?" And like they itemize everything and it's
Yeah.
like they're cashing in their good boy or their good girl points and they're like,
Yeah. They have like
"So,
a whole list on
yeah.
their computer that they're like crossing. Well, it's like, well, look, I still have like 4 points here, so like, you owe me.
Yes, this was an exchange. How did you not know?" And it's like, I thought you were just being nice because that's what people do. Like,
Yeah.
nope. This there was I was totally expecting some sort of favor, whether physical or otherwise, to come out of this,
Mm-hmm.
and that's I think that's where a lot of danger comes in. And I mean, like in the online world, that happens a lot. That's people. There's that whole word that sounds like shrimp, right? It's like people buy
Mm.
into. They're like, if I just give this person enough money, then surely like after a while they're gonna be like, I love you.
Yeah. No,
Right,
for
like
sure.
people believe that way, and that's just like the folly of mankind.
Mm-hmm. I was also gonna say like going into the online stuff and like you were saying like the shrimps and stuff. I think like one of the biggest places I've seen this like have really bad fallout is in Discord of all things. The amount of people that I've seen getting like the stories that come out about like people getting groomed on Discord because they meet in like these like mutual communities. It's like, oh, I also follow this like big creator, or I also like this like type of like, I don't know, look into like even Pokemon discords and stuff, like people who just want to meet over like certain hobbies. And then it's like people will get taken advantage of because like, oh, this person just likes me because like, you know, we're into the same stuff, we have a good connection. And then slowly things progressively get worse and worse. And it's like, it's so slow and over time, and because you think it's online, you don't think anything's really happening. You're like, like it's being a little weird and like I can brush it off. But then like, you know, they're like pulling back and you're like, oh well, I don't want to lose my friends, so like they'll pull back in and they'll like kind of start treating them nicer again. And it's like this really weird back and forth that I've seen like a bunch of times, especially in like recent years as Discord's gotten bigger. It's like grooming has become so much easier. Like pedophiles were the big thing for a while, like went back like in 2010 to 2015, like there was all these like pedophiles online, and like you would just see them going after kids in like chat rooms. But now we have like whole platforms that are meant for people to connect, so now you can like really get into like people's heads and stuff like that way more, because it's not like just a single chat room. It's like it's a whole place where you can connect with people. Like Discord's really great for connecting with people, but it also means that like you have no idea who you might be connecting with.
That's true. That's true. And it's like, and nobody is ever going to be directly upfront and honest with everything that like about their person in their past immediately. Like if they are, why are you volunteering so much information so quickly? Like what's the goal here? Like you're now, it's like you're really eager to win my trust over, and that's making me even more like sus about you.
Like, are you like I've also seen like, again, like kind of going with that, there's like people who trauma dump, but it's like to like almost get like a sympathy reaction. So it's like, oh well, if I just tell them all this bad stuff, they're not gonna like leave me. And
Yes.
I've seen that happen. I've had it happen to me where people will like get really close to you really quickly because they'll tell you all this stuff, and then you feel really bad just like disregarding the person. And I'm like, again, I'm a little bit like more callous than the average person, and even it was hard for me to like say like, hey, you need to fuck off, like, because there's people who will just like trauma dump to the point that like you're like, holy shit, if I like leave this person, they're gonna kill themselves or something.
And then it's like there is that perceived relationship, whatever it is, because then you'll get things like, oh, everybody abandons me, and you're just like, you will just so then there's like that whole kind of guilt aspect that happens. And I understand that people like, we as humans, we have emotions, we go through a lot, and it sucks to be human sometimes and to be alone, but like we each have different capacities to be able to handle those type of things, especially like when everybody's dealing like with their own lives. And like we are on very friendly terms and we collaborate, but like outside of this, I don't know like what is the Kingdom Rex, like what's
Yeah.
going on in your mind. So it's we have like a respect and a balance, but there are people out there who are just like, they're like, no, I need to tell you everything. I've
Yeah.
confided in you, and I need you. It's like as soon as that word comes out, that if anything makes me run for the hills, and anything that's potentially romantic is like, I need you, and I'm
Oh
like,
yeah.
oh, I'm like,
Because those are the
uh-oh.
type of people who later, it's like the minute that you get into a fight, like why are you doing this to me? I'm gonna kill myself. You're like, I just need a break. Like I need to take like an hour to like just go get some air. And they're like, why are you walking away from me? You're like everyone else. It's like, oh fuck, what did I stumble into?
Right, and that happens, and I mean, like, there's a lot of things that an individual in that situation with that mindset has to sort out with their life, and they may require like a professional, like a therapist, who can help them kind of categorize, like, all right, put everything in a notepad. Let's really like suss it out as a professional and see if this is like if there's a solution, because like that dependency is part of the problem. And I mean, I'm a big person who believes in interdependence. Like we should work together, but like codependence or like just being dependent,
Yeah.
I think that there are issues there that I don't mesh well with. So you know, I have to be
It's
careful. That's another reason why I keep
yeah.
myself pretty well isolated from relationships. It's not because I believe that everyone's like that, but because
It's
it's
hard to know
better
who will
for
be.
it is, and it's better for my health, from like my own understanding, to be like, I am a best in a support role if I'm unattached romantically.
Minimal was saying, I took down a prolific French pedophile who started a campaign to dox and release private videos of my girlfriend at the time. I was a mod in his chat and he lured a 12-year-old in. I think dependency is just a fringe dynamic that can work, but inconsistently. I think dependency is good to an extent, but I think when people hear dependency, they have a really bad connotation. I remember I was like this for a long time, where I would like the minute I heard dependency, like that interdependency, even in a relationship, it really freaked me out because it meant like being open with somebody else. And I think that can be a really good thing for people. But I think some people take it too far because they'll get into relationships and jump from relationship to relationship because they can't actually be independent. So it's like that dependency is like really, really hard to balance because you want that dependency in a relationship because you need to be able to rely on each other. But you don't want to be so dependent on the person in a relationship that like nothing else matters. Like, and if I'm not in a relationship, I'm lost. Like, I need someone else beside me or I'm fucked. Because there is a lot of people like that who like will just like whatever they get out of a relationship, like they can only get out of a relationship, they have to be with someone who can like almost not take care of them in the sense of like they're doing everything for them, take care of them in the sense like emotionally, like they have someone to go home and like rely on and like just like, you know, meld into almost.
Yeah, and I mean we see the negative effects of that like in statistics and through anecdote and through the experience of those we know around us, right? Because people will stay in very unhealthy relationships because they're like, I know I'm abused mentally or physically, but like they're always there for me, and
Yeah.
it's I've been with them for so long that like what am I gonna do? Like I can't be without, and it's like and that's where the like there's the heart of the problem. It's like you would rather endure all the toxicity and whatever trauma is associated because of that fear and inability to like live, to be alone and to be
Mm-hmm.
independent, and like and there are plenty of people out there who are just in those situations, and not even by like having children, which is a whole different thing altogether that people have to discuss about together when that occurs, but like
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, just people out there who are like, yeah, like they're like, just get out of the relationship. You always complain about how bad this person is to you, and they're like, yeah, but where am I gonna go? They're the only one who really loves me, and but it's like, well, oh, yeah, there's a lot to unpack here, you know,
Yeah,
and
and it's even harder because like a lot of those abuse situations, like people who are abused either are already so isolated that they get into those relationships because those people are willing to like take anyone that they can make into a victim, or there's someone who like ends up getting isolated really quick from their family because the abuser is like really good at like ripping you away from everything outside, and then once you are in that situation, you like can't get out of it because you're like, oh shit, I'm not close to anyone else in my life anymore. And that makes it super hard because like even if you have that dependent tendency, you have nowhere else to turn either because like now you're dependent on this person and you have no dependence if you leave this person.
that happens. That definitely does. And you know, in my growth experiences in relationships, you know, learning about what love is, learning and like what a proper functioning relationship is, and wrestling with like emotions and desires. There's been points in my younger life where like I've been that dependent person. I'm just like so invested in the person, like I don't ever want them to leave, like not like keep them prisoner, but like I just want them to
I
be
need them
around
around.
because I care about them and it feels good when they're around. And it's like you have to figure out a way to actually like come to terms with those emotions, be like, okay, like I need to step back and really examine the situation, but your emotions like, no, don't listen to your brain, ignore that thing, it doesn't know what it's talking about.
I don't know if you feel like this, but I feel like from what it seems like we have similar mentalities about the independence and like being kind of like guarded and stuff. But did you ever feel like getting into relationships? Like, did you feel that you were scared of that dependency because you were so used to being alone that you're scared the minute that you get a little bit of that interdependency, you are gonna like fall really hard into it and like feel like you're now totally dependent on that person because you've never had it, and all of a sudden you hit it and you're like, oh shit, I need this, and now like you can't get out of it.
Well, that was definitely in my younger, it's like I've I'm not gonna say like, oh, I've had like hundreds of lovers or anything like that, because I'm very prudent. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's one thing that my friends know about me well, is that I'm very much prudent. So like when it comes to selecting romantic partners, those experiences are few by design. But yeah, like in the beginning when it was new, I'm like, I've not known what a relationship was, been told all my life by movies and media and family, like you need to be in a relationship, you need to find the one that you love, and
Mm-hmm.
that romantic love exists, and that everybody has somebody out there for them, specifically for them, and like once you find them, never let them go, like all these romantic notions that skewed my mindscape. So I'm like, once I was in something that seemed like it was working, I was like, I have to put every fiber into my being to holding this thing together. And that's where the mistake occurs, because if it can't maintain itself naturally, then you're forcing a situation, and anytime you force the situation, it becomes perverted, in my own experience.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that. I guess like yeah, because I kind of what you were saying like when you were younger, like you felt that, and I think I did feel that like especially when I first kind of got into that dating scene, and which why I didn't date. I like kind of just flirted around, like went on dates, but never really got like super into it with anyone, just because I think I was still like super scared that like the minute I touch it, it's like if I fall in love, like that was scary because I was like I'm never gonna be able to let that person go. And I think I like knew I needed to be more stable before I ever went into like a situation like that. Because I was like, there's no way that at that time I was gonna be like getting into a relationship and it'd be healthy. Because either I'm gonna like disconnect from you so hard to try to like avoid that happening, so I'm gonna like push you away. I'm gonna like just I'm not gonna like engage with you as I should in a relationship, or I'm gonna like not do that, and then it's gonna fall hardcore into like I'm dependent on you, like I need to see you every other day, I need to be like with you all the time, because I'm scared to be alone now.
Yeah, that happens. That happens with individuals. And it happens most notably with people like once they sleep together too. Like I've had friends who are like, just like in their drunkest moments, just being completely honest. They're like, yeah, they're like, if I sleep with this person, I'm gonna be in love. And I'm like, damn, that's like, but that's the truth. They know the truth of their
Yeah.
person. So they have to be cautious with that, because they already understand that like that there will be an attachment, and that they do it anyway, and then history repeats. But that happens because there's association with like what's physical is love, and that's not necessarily true.
I think that's always been interesting to me because I think I'm so much the opposite. With the physical has never been super like I could probably do it with like people I like and not have a connection develop. Like I would probably be fine to like just let that person go if I thought they were like hot, hooked up with them, and they'd be like gone. I don't have a huge like connection through that. But like if I like really fall in love with your personality, then I'm like that's like what does it for me. And I always know it's like I talk to so many people who are it's the other way, where it's like I like you can connect with this person all you want. You go on all these dates. You're like really enjoying each other's company. But the minute they hook up with them, they like cannot let that person go. And I know it's biological. A lot of it that driven, especially for women. Like you release like certain hormones and stuff that makes you want to like be around that person, be with that person. Like it does form a different connection just because of that biological aspect. And I think like I don't know, maybe I'm just like got low hormones or something, but I was always like the other way, where I was like I can like hook up with these people and I won't get that attached. But like if I like spend too much time with you and like get to really know you, and then I really like your personality, then I'm like shit, it's gonna be so hard to get you out of my life. Unless you screw me over, then I can like drop people like no problem. But like for people I like, it's like if I like you, it's like I'm gone.
Yeah, and so one of the most interesting relationships that I had in my late 20s, I think it was with the person who was asexed. Like they just they we worked really well together as a couple, because we had this weird friendship that was like more than a friendship. But the thing about them is it's just like they just were, she didn't have that sexual attraction to anybody. Like there was like a physical attraction where like you like objectively like
You're
you are an
aesthetically
attractive
pleasing, yeah.
person, and I like being around you, and I like certain amounts of physical affection, like hand holding, cuddling, like things like that, like human closeness. But when it came to the idea of engaging in something sexual, is there was zero interest, zero. And there's been like no one that was just like I'm not saying that there would be someone who'd come along and they'd be like, yeah, they're like, finally I decided to do it, it was great, awesome, changed my mind, I'm on the sex team for life. Like I think that there are people who do just like exist out there where it's like they're like, I'm just not interested sexually, and they find their fulfillment, and we fail to understand it within them, that it comes from something else, that they're like, I'm complete, like your company makes me complete, this feeling that I get from you and being with
The
you is
warmth I
not.
feel, like the
Yeah,
wholeness I feel, like
it's
it
not.
comes from something else, not just like that
Yeah,
physical piece.
yeah, it's not like, it's not the, oh, like we have this biological need to be driven to each other like this because we have to reproduce, because that's what keeps the story going on, because there has to constantly be people being made. It's like that she was aware, and her biology made it possible for her to ignore that need, and to make it not present in such a way that, like, when she found what made her happy in relationships, and made her like love, like not a person that was like void of love. Just because a person is asexual doesn't mean that they can't love, because that's untrue.
Yeah.
She did loved tremendously, but when it came to loving like sexually, it just wasn't there. But that wasn't how she was fulfilled. And me being in, like, never under, like, that was, she was the first person that I even heard say, like, I'm asexual. And for my younger 20 something hormonal mind, thinking like, she's pretty, she's cute, she likes to hang out with me, we're attracted to each other, like, why can't this happen? Like, what is this thing that's stopping, like,
Yeah.
this, my biological like attraction to her being like, let's do this? She's like, like, there was never a point to where we got to like getting undressed or anything like that, or
Yeah.
forcing the subject to occur. Like, I still respected her autonomy and
Oh, for
decision
sure.
to not engage. But I'd like, the question in my ignorance was like, why? Like, what is it? And then that's
Yeah.
where things started to fall apart. It's because she's like, the answer that this is who I am wasn't enough. And in my own ignorance
Yeah.
of being able to understand it is what made things fall apart. And I should have acknowledged at the time, like, if that was important to me to have a sexual relationship with the person whom I was engaged with at the time, like, that clearly, like, this was already incompatible. This aspect wasn't going to work. But had I come into the relationship in a more seasoned way, like, have got all of those things out of my system, like those physical desires, then it would have been better, because we probably could have continued on in our relationship and been happy, even be married without consummating, like, just finally acknowledging that there's something beyond that need, and like, she had the answer to that I couldn't understand or grasp.
And yeah, I think especially for you, like you said, you were like in your early 20s, so that was quite a while ago. I think that ignorance, and this is kind of a side tangent point, I think that ignorance is something that we like demonize too much in people, especially now with like gender and sexuality being such a big topic with like the LGBT and stuff. I think we really demonize that ignorance and like not understanding like why people are the way they are, or like understanding like people on that spectrum. I think it's okay to not understand, and it's okay to ask questions, and like just want answers. And like for you, like obviously like you were respectful or autonomy, and that's like the most important thing. But in your head, like at that age, like you didn't have much access to like information on like someone who's asexual. Like I think that's like, you know, if you hear that today, you could probably like look it up and find like a lot of resources. But back then, like, who knows how much like resource actually existed on like something like what was considered niche at the point, like asexual. So I think like, especially at the time that like this happened to you, it was like super normal to like have that reaction of like, is there something wrong with me? Is there something wrong with her? Why can't we have this? Like, what's like, what is going on here? And I think that like reaction is like pretty, like a pretty gut reaction to a situation when you hear something like that. And I don't think that's anything to be ashamed of or anything to like demonize in people, because I think it is just like, it's a natural reaction when you don't understand something. Yeah, I mean, I did want to get into like the LGBT stuff a little bit too, because I think like that's a huge topic, especially I'm bisexual, so for me it's like being in the community, I see like a lot of good aspects, but then I see a lot of people say stuff that I'm like, oh Lord, okay, we could get into this, but Jesus, like some people are just super extreme with all these like the gender, sexuality, and dating stuff. I think becomes super hard when like everything's like all the moving parts are moving really fast right now. So like LGBT advocacy is moving super fast. I think the world is changing on some points, like really, really quickly in certain communities, but other other places in the world just have like, or even across like our like the Western world, right, have not caught up to like the point of like the like most progressive people. And so then it starts to cause issues of division, because people are like, well, that's a little too far, and they're like, well, no, it's not far enough, and it's like, shit, okay, calm down.
Yeah, and that's part of, I think, kind of an inherent drive, is like, once, like, that those laws of motion from Newton, right? Like, once something in motion tends to stay in motion, something at rest tends to stay at rest, to paraphrase. So it's like, when that train starts moving, so to speak, when it comes to topics and changes and social thought and new ways of understanding each other, it's like let's go full steam ahead. We're moving. Let's just plow through everything
Yeah.
at full speed. Let's not even take our time with it because we are on the road, and when we stop, we don't know when we're going to start again. So let's just overindulge. And it's like
Yeah.
there's a need of temperance, right? Like
Yeah.
take it slow. My friend Pixie Kinky here on Twitch. She's one of my mods, very close friend. I'm one of those people that when I become focused on something and when something's in my sights, I will burn the candle at both ends in pursuit
Yeah.
of it, and like my focus is entirely directed at that thing to the point to where like I will be like, damn, I haven't slept for 18 or 20 hours,
Yep.
and then I'll be like, this is fine, I can manage, and then those people look in who genuinely, they're like, you need to like just, they're
Chill
like,
out.
you'll get that task done, just scale it back. Take your time, slow and steady. I'm like, no, like I'm feeling this now. I need to
Well, the
throw
problem
myself
with like
completely into it.
the problem with going that fast too is like you end up missing things, and like this goes for like even going back to the original point, like it goes for that advocacy piece of like people want to push things so fast, but no one thinks about the consequences because we're going so fast in one direction that we're like, well, no, this sounds like a great idea. Why wouldn't we do this? And it's like, well, if you stop and think about it, there might be some like backlash, like there might be some problems on the other end of this. And it's like, it's not necessarily to say that we should stop progressing. It just means that like maybe we shouldn't be like rapidly progressing to the point that like, nothing else matters. Like we don't have to think about like consequences because this is all good stuff for the society. It's like you don't know that. Like we haven't, like we need to stop and think about these things. Like, and again, I'm in the LGBT community and there's a lot of things that they advocate for that are great. Like, we got gay marriage finally. Gay people are now being able to adopt kids easier. Trans people are able have access to hormones easier and surgery and like therapy to like get to go through transition. But then we start pushing on issues that I'm like, this isn't necessarily something that we need to push on really this quick, especially when we don't even have like complete support in like certain issues that aren't even that extreme, right? You're Sterling, F a date. I take you on a date to a gumball machine with a swirly butt. Oh my goodness, what a great date! But yeah, I think that's one of those things that you have to be really careful with, especially when it comes to like dating and like these are some like niche-ish topics. But like I think one of the big ones that happened a little while ago was like the trans and dating advocacy. And I get it, for a lot of trans people, it's like really hard to date, right? And I completely understand that. But there are going to be people who probably don't want to date you because you're trans, and I don't necessarily think that's a transphobic action. I think there's a lot of people like who either like see a certain life for themselves, like with the kids. They see themselves like maybe genital preference is gonna if you haven't gotten a full surgery, there's gonna be people who reject you on that notion, and there might be people who are just coming around to the idea of like trans people existing, and they're not going to want to date a trans person because they're not even comfortable with the idea yet, and they're just getting there, and dating someone who is trans is going to be really hard for them. And I think that's like, I don't think that's, again, that ignorance piece is, I don't know if we should be necessarily demonizing that and saying like, well, you're transphobic, you're a bad person. It's like, well, maybe they're coming to it, like they're in a world that still hasn't caught up to like a lot of the new age like progressive movements. So like for me, dating a trans person would be like no problem, like I don't care. But for someone who's like maybe grew up with a conservative family, moved to like a like more progressive space, they've only just been learning about trans people existing, or they don't know, like they always just like, they're like, what's the difference between, like there's people who still ask what's the difference between a transgender person and a crossdresser, because people just don't know what these things are yet still. And like to push it to the point that like, oh well, we need like this bill, and like if you're like doing this, then like you're transphobic because you won't date me. It's like, man, you're pushing on the wrong issues right now, because all you're doing is like pushing people back to like a regressive point, because it's like, if they can't even get on board with step 1 and you're pushing step 4 on them, they're going to run back to step 0 because they're terrified now.
Yeah. And like the whole like the whole idea of being disinterested. And yeah, like for me, like genital preference would be it. Like if even if at first like I run into a person who is trans female, is now like identifies as female, but like we still share genitals in common, that's going to be something that I'm like, I respect your decision, I support your choice, but like for this, that for me personally is a deal breaker, and I can't engage into that kind of relationship. And it's not because like I'm afraid of you or I think that what you're doing is wrong. Like I respect your existence, but it's I know from my life like what works for me in a relationship and who I'm attracted to, and like that's just not it. But it's not that I'm transphobic or anything in that regard, because like I get rejected by women who are, identify as heterosexual, and it's not like because they hate men, it's just because for whatever reason, like whatever reason they have, I'm not what they are into. And that doesn't mean that like they hate men or they hate me. I just have to respect that like they're like, I'm not interested. And I
Yeah.
can't be like, oh, there's some sort of like greater underlying trauma there
Yeah.
that's causing you to not want to be with me. Like I just have to like as a
Yeah.
human be like, well,
There
like
might be
some
characteristics about myself that some people are not into, and that is the reality of the
yeah.
world.
And it is, but it's hard to deal with, like, because I don't think I've ever met anyone really that's been like, yeah, I just love going up and to people that I'm interested in romantically and just having them shoot me down to the ground. Like, feels great, I live for the
I'm sure there's
rejection.
there has to be someone with that kink, you know?
In a world of infinite possibilities, I believe there are people who are just like treat me bad, daddy or mommy, and step on me, and they want that rejection. And
Literally everyone on Twitter.
yeah, but on whole, like I don't think if you went up to somebody that you were like, okay, I'm gonna take this chance, like I've liked them for a while, I've verified these feelings are genuine, and then like they're like, let's just be friends or not at all, and then it's like, and then you're like, well, for me it's only more than friends or not at all, and it's like, well, then it's not at all, like
Yeah.
and then it's like, no, like give me a chance, let's make this happen. It's like, don't like if there is no room for it to occur naturally, then don't force the situation, because you can't make these things happen if they were never designed to.
Yeah. No, for sure. And I think that's like the big thing. And like even I remember this being a discussion, I think even before the trans topic came up. I think like I remember there was like a big like I said, I follow the like politics side of Twitch, so a lot of the times when I'm like referencing, there was like a point when it's usually because it's like big in like either social media, like Twitter, everyone's talking about it, like all the activist accounts are talking about it, or like it's big on Twitch, like everyone on Twitch is talking about it. I remember like the whole idea of like race preferences when it came to dating, and I'm like, there might be some level of race preference that might be like tied to racism, but I don't think the average person who has like a race preference is being like racist. I think they just have like a preference for what they like are into. Like I think someone who has like there's probably like there's a point where it gets to fetishization and there's a point where it gets to racism. Somewhere in the middle of those two is you're probably okay to have some level of race preference. Like for me, I'm brown, I'm Indian. I would never date another Indian person. And that's not because I hate Indians. It's because I'm like, I don't think I'm like, my family's really progressive. I would not meld well into most Indian families easily, unless I know they're as like progressive as my family. And also I know like a lot of people in the community, like at my age, boys who are my age especially, it's like, these are not the type of guys I want to be around because I know what they're like, I know what they're into. They're not, a lot of times like we have a lot of issues of like boys getting treated like super well and like not super well. They're like coddled in our culture a lot of times, so they end up being like much more entitled when it comes to like relationships and women. So I don't engage with other brown people, and I'm like, I don't think that's racist. It just means that like there's something about this group of people that like maybe doesn't meld well with me, or it might just be that like I'm not super attracted to certain like groups of people. Like maybe there's certain characteristics that I'm like, it's not aesthetically pleasing to my eye. And again, I don't think that's necessarily racist. Like if someone wasn't attracted to brown women, I don't think I'd be offended, because it's like maybe there's just something about like the typical average looking brown woman who like you're not super attracted to those characteristics, and I don't think it necessarily makes you racist. Maybe it's like shitty at the worst, but like I don't know if that's something to, like go so hard after people for, being like, oh well, you won't date like this group of people, like that's racist. It's like, okay, would you rather me date them and not enjoy it, or like like what is the point there, right?
Yeah. So I have a couple of things that I'd like to latch on to that you discussed. So I come from the mixed heritage. I'm sure people are quite familiar with now that have engaged with us in these conversations. So on my mom's side, Latin American heritage, descent, Mexican descent. My dad's side is Anglo, Dutch, Irish, Scot, And both sides of the family are traditionally agricultural, industrial families, so they're very large. And I'm from a small town. And for me, like being mixed, I typically, like in my hometown, normally don't date other women of Mexican heritage or even other women of Anglo heritage because my family is so large. Like there's this fear in the back of my head that like I'm gonna be like, oh, she's cute, and then we hook up, and then I see her at a family reunion,
Oh
and
yeah.
then I'm like, oh, fuck,
Yeah.
like this just got awkward
I'm gonna tell you right now,
super
it's the same thing for brown
fast.
people, especially in my town. There's a lot of brown people where I am. So like, you're gonna like date someone, go out, and hook up, and then all of a sudden you go to like a wedding next week, and you're like, oh shit, oh no. So I understand that feeling too.
But like for me, that doesn't. I don't like take these individuals like different races and ethnicities like off the table. Like the further I get away from home, then like for me, what appeals to me is like beauty of aesthetics and beauty of mind and personality. So if I find someone that I vibe with and I can verify like 100% like we are not related, like, and if a person believes and like everybody came from Adam and Eve and blah blah blah, then like of course like we're just all products of incest at that point, then like what does it matter? But I want to be as far away from the genetic commonality than closer to it. And like for me, I do kind of have a preference to date like people who are non-white or Latin American but of non-Mexican descent. And it's not because like, oh, like there's something wrong with them. It's because like part of my mind and my biology is like if something is to occur and like we have kids or whatever, like I want there to be as much genetic diversity like between us, and it's not fetishized in a way like, well, like, oh, I want to go after like a Persian girl or an Asian girl or
It's like
someone
how I would
like,
never buy like a purebred dog because I'm like the
yeah,
chances of it dying young are probably way higher.
yeah,
You know?
yeah. And I find beauty in everybody, and beauty in even men. Like I'm not someone who is attracted to men, but when I see a beautiful man or a handsome, I'm like that boy over there. He got them looks, and I know it, and I know he knows it, and I'm like, sir, you are handsome, thumbs up. And it's like sometimes when guys get compliments from a guy, it's like it can either be weird, they're like you gay, or they're like, bro, like
Like I
thank you,
needed that
man.
today.
I needed that today, and you're like, I love you, man. And it's just like that's I believe in a universal love. Like there's a love that transcends like these barriers of our identities that we can apply to each other. And sometimes like another person needs those words, to hear those words from one of their kind, like to be accepted and to be acknowledged for those things. And that's important to me. But like for me, I want to have like a diverse partner. I want someone that is far away from my family, because I want there to be, that genetic distance, that diversity, and then I look for that in individuals, and it's like, but then again, like those I will still date, and I'm attracted to other like women of Mexican descent, other women of Anglo descent who are Scotch Irish, and it's like typically like if I go to a city like Los Angeles or something, like my family is like Northern California, like they are there, they're like in that town, that is where they're from, they are there. Everywhere else, not so much. So there are times where I've like entertained those relationships because I'm like, the chances that we're gonna have this awkward oh shit moment where I'm like we're related, I can actually indulge this. And like I have just one little example of this is I used to work in a grocery store, and all the male clerks, whenever there was a hot girl they'd be, there's a hot girl over on blah blah blah, and they're like bro, would you hit that? And like I'm there one day, I get that query put to me. I look down the aisle that they're pointing. I'm like, dude, that's my cousin. They're like, but would you hit it? I'm like, what?
What do you mean?
No, that's my cousin, and that's like, like, no, absolutely not. Like, they're like, but she's hot. I'm like, I know, I know, like the women in my family, they are attractive. Like for some reason, they just like there's
Good
a genetic
genetics. Yeah.
lottery. Yeah, like they are just objectively attractive, and I
Yeah.
know it. Like, and that's kind of skewed like my preference towards what is beautiful because I grew up in an environment where all of the women were beautiful and were very adept at keeping themselves so, and there was a high value on it. So that's like partly
I just want to
ingrained
pause
into me.
you.
But
You're gonna get a future girlfriend, and she's gonna watch this clip, and she's like, "Oh, so you're dating me because I'm ugly."
Well, I've learned about more than just what's physical, right? Like there's like
She's gonna love to hear
like
that
for
too.
yeah, like but that's like one of the things like as a young man, and it's so this is and here's a weird fact that's kind of that I'm gonna share with you that your stream gets to learn. Like my parents when I was growing up, like they were entrepreneurs. They owned a lingerie shop. My biological parents when they were together.
Oh wow.
So like they would take me to work and I'm like playing the Atari and I'm like 3, but like there's women coming in trying lingerie. I'm a non-threat because I'm not like a perverted kid. I'm not like going into the changing rooms. I'm just
Yeah.
there playing my little Atari like in the corner while my mom and my dad are working. But like I'm exposed. I'm in a place where it's all lingerie. Like this is already bombarding all of my senses and like probably intruding into my subconscious at a very young age. It's like and then like every like the standards of beauty and the appreciation of it. So there's like this whole mess of like what's influencing my preferences. But then like I can find beauty in like everyone kind of universally now, and that's taken like a lot of adult introspection to like learn and appreciate and like to apply love to everybody and like to say that like I love people openly and not just because like I think it's only okay to love women or and women should only love men or anything like that, but like to be like, hey man, like I love you, man, you're like my brother, and not be like, ugh, gross, like
Yeah.
that even my circle of friends, we've got to the point to like man, like even if they don't like say I love you, it's like I'm really glad you're like here. You know, it's
No, for
like
sure.
there's still like they're working towards it. They're like, man, it's like you're like a brother to me, and it means a lot to me to like have you in my life. And I'm like, such touching moment to like
I
keep
love
yourself
that.
together. I'm like, I can't help it. I can't help it.
I think that's such a nice thing that's also come with like a little bit more of like the progressive movement. Like it's so nice that I think men can now have like a little bit more openly like very like not I don't want to say intimate in the sense of like relationship intimate, but like intimate friendships where they're like very emotionally open with each other, very like and will communicate that in a way that like I think a lot of times like before it wasn't really normal to like talk to your homie that way. And like even being like physical contact, like a lot of guys would not like hug their like buddies or whatever, and it was just like really not normal. Especially in Western cultures, not so much in other cultures. Like I know back in India, it was really normal for like men to like walk around holding hands if you were friends, even because it's just we are just more of an intimate culture in the general. But like I know I really like that here now. It's like it's become so much more normalized for guys to be like super like emotionally open with each other, be able to talk about things in a way that I think for a long time only women could with each other, or it was only normalized for women to. And if you did it with your bros, you were probably looked at kind of like odd. They're like, "What the fuck are you on about?" Like, dude, shut up.
Yeah, and like so one of the goofy things, like so my hometown is very, it's leaning more progressive, like more accepting of things. But like there's still these old things like that die hard. They're moving out of way of popularity, but there are still tinges. So when I hang out with my guy friends, like we are very like tight knit brotherhood. We are nerds, so we call ourselves the Fellowship because we all bonded at a young age over like the Lord of the Rings movies when they came
I
out, and
love that.
it's like yeah, but like the thing that we provide for each other is a different level of like emotional support and acceptance that like their significant others can't give to each other. So it's like when I show up, especially like during the past holidays, they're like, "Oh, great, your boyfriend's here," and like in the past they'd be like boy, I'm like, no, I'm not gay. How dare you say something like that? Like as like a teenager, I would react very harshly to that.
Yeah,
But like I step back and it's like I get that they're joking about that, and but like at the same time, there's that little tinge that like they understand like the role and the love that we provide for each other within our fraternity is something that we can only gain from each other. And it's like
yeah,
it's not like women are excluded from hanging out with us because we don't exclude the women in our lives when it comes to our gatherings, but they see and they recognize that there's a bond that we share that is exclusive to us, and not in sense that like you like He-Man Woman Haters Club, women not allowed. It's just like it's just something that we fulfill within each other,
yeah.
that we can only gain from our fraternity, like with each other. It's some sort of weird kind of love, and it's like so yeah. When they're like, "Oh, your boyfriend's here," like Yeah, because we're like excited. We're like, yeah, they're like, we're finally here. We're hanging out, man. Super excited. Let's have some fun. Like they're like, why can't you look at me like you look like JD and Turk and Scrubs? Like that's the best analogy. Like with
Yeah.
my best friends, there's always like one's a JD and one's a Turk, and it's just like it's guy love, and it's like once you can become comfortable with that without it being weird, right? Because there's always a possibility for it to like cross the line into weird if you're too comfortable with it. But like that we're getting to the point to where we can acknowledge even in man speak, like, hey, you're important to me and I'm glad that we met. Like
Yeah.
this, we understand that's code for I love you, man, but without having to say the words. Like we're getting to the point now where it's like in the past, even acknowledging like, hey man, like having you around, it's like I'm glad that we're
Yeah.
friends. You'd be like, ew, sissy, gross.
No,
Get
for
away from
sure.
me.
I think like it's it's nice because I think that's something that for a lot of time, like for a long time, like guys could only get from like being in a relationship. So they clung, like I think it made you cling onto a relationship because you wanted that intimacy with somebody that you couldn't get with anyone else. Whereas like for girls, it's like I think the reason why like there was the whole joke of like girls get over the relationship, like you call your girlfriends over, you eat ice cream, you like hang out together because you could get that like support and intimacy from like somewhere else. Whereas for guys, it's like, oh, go hook up with another girl. Like that's how you get over a breakup. And that was like the big, like not running joke, but like, you know, the running theme in like TV shows and media and stuff like that. Like that was what the stereotype is. And it was because like, I think guys couldn't rely on other guys for that support. So the idea was that you go to like another woman, you fuck it out, right? And for girls, it was like, no, you go support, like you go to your girlfriends, you like, you know, they support you, they help you feel better. And I think now that like we've opened that up more, it's like, oh, okay, now like guys can do that with each other, and like now you can feel comfortable like opening up to someone else and like, you know, maybe being a little bit more emotional and open with your guys and not feeling the need to like run off and like just do another hookup or like find more destructive ways to like deal with some bad situation.
Yeah, and that's something I can relate to personally because growing up, it was like if you have this need to like, have any type of affection met, you find a woman who's going to meet that need. Like that's the only acceptable avenue, and that's and that was like the lesson that all guys got. So it's like just hanging out and like just being able to just enjoy each other's company and just have fun. Like this is a friendship. It's like a brotherhood. We're connecting, we're bonding. It's like, but as soon as someone's like, I'm digging this, like, oh gross,
Yeah.
go hug your mom or something. Like
Yeah, right?
get out
Yeah.
of here. Like that's not what
There's
that's
always a
not
very
what boys
negative
do.
reaction to like anything that was
Yeah.
like it's even deemed emotional, anything that like seemed too feminine or right, like, and I think that was like the whole idea was like even like any type of femininity within men was like super demonized, like, oh, like why are you acting like a girl, like why are you being so like bitchy or like whatever,
Yeah.
like why are you being so like why are you being like such a girl, like that was the thing, right? Like if you opened up like that, it was like expected. And it's like even if it was like just something wasn't like relationship like broke up, but like maybe you're just going through a hard time in life. I think for at least some guys that I know, like I've seen it less so now, but like definitely growing up, it was like you would always meet guys who was like they could not open up because they had like no outlet ever. Like if you didn't have a lot of female friends, and you know you can't open up to your parents about everything, so like they just never felt they had an outlet to like talk about their issues, even just like basic stuff, like, you know, maybe there's family issues, maybe there's like money issues, maybe someone died. Like I think a lot of guys felt like a lot of guys will pent that up, not only because it's like encouraged by society that you don't talk about those things, you don't like cry, you don't like you know open up, but also because I don't think they had an outlet that they felt safe opening up either.
Yeah, and so like a lot of not a lot of my guy friends, but there have been select like friends within the fraternity where we've grown up with that same like affection from women. That's the only place to get it, and then like they get into relationships, and then that's the only place that it's ever been fulfilled. The relationships end, and it's like there have been times where they're like, man, I'm just like really depressed. I am alone and I don't know what to do. They're like, can you come over and hang out, man? I'm like, yeah, you're my brother, dude. Like, why wouldn't I? Why wouldn't I be there in your time of need? And they're like, dude, you don't have to be like that. I'm like, I care about you, man. And I don't like you like that if I have to make it clear, but like you're my friend and I'm gonna be there for you. Like especially if you feel like there's no one else that you could like, because we don't normally turn to our parents and like you don't want to be a mama's boy, right? Like
Yeah.
after a certain point, like it's not acceptable to be like, so like still like we wrestle with that. Like
Yeah,
my
you went
mother
to
and
hit
I,
like Oh yeah.
we have we have a very strained relationship because she never stops being a mom, and I'm like what you want to give me like through love and care as being a mother is not something that I am comfortable accepting like as a man, and it's still like problematic for me to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
But we understand each other and get along better now, like knowing that there's boundaries there. But with my guy friends, it's like finally we like have the point where like, man, I miss hanging out with you, brother. It's just like it's been a long time, and we've realized that there's something more to be had out of like a universal love and appreciation for each other that we couldn't acknowledge before. And it's like in those moments of weakness we've realized like our strength comes from our connection.
Yeah. Metamoto was saying like, yeah, gay was the catch-all for dehumanizing a person on their identity. For sure. Like, yeah, whether it was like a gay insult or a feminine insult, like it was one of those things that like it was really put down to act like. And I think even the gay thing probably came because like gay men were seen as super feminine, and that was a bad thing, and being gay was seen as a bad thing. So it was really easy to use that to like anything that seemed like, you know, intimate, emotional with like someone that wasn't a woman. It was like, oh, what the fuck, right? Because it wasn't normal for guys to have like that emotional relationship with like anyone other than a woman. So it's like if you're trying to be emotional with a guy, they're gonna see you as gay because they're like, okay, you're being gay with me. What the hell, right? Because they can't see a lot of times they couldn't see that emotional piece like as anything but something you would do with it in the context of a relationship or in the context of like with another woman, like whether it be your mom or yeah girlfriend.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I still see that, like, even within my friends' sons. They're like my friends, of course. Again, that's reiterating, like, those guys. They're all brothers to me, so their kids are like my nephews and my nieces. Like, I'm really
Mm-hmm.
close to them, and they have teenage sons who are like, when they don't like something, they're like, "Oh, that's gay," and I'm like, now as an adult male, I'm like we're actually beyond that point now. It's like
Mm-hmm.
I understand you're a young man, and this is just what people say, but like there's actually something bigger at hand here,
Yeah.
and you should probably find a different word to vent your frustrations with
Yeah.
because like it's and I understand that they're still kind of a product of the environment that they're living in, and that eventually it will become less prevalent. But
Yeah.
like I'm like, young man, just sit down with me for a little while,
But
and
that's the
let's
right
try
thing to
to.
do, right? Like they're ignorant to like how like what the connotations between like behind using like gay as an insult is, right? Like they're not gonna instantly know like the societal impact, like, oh, this is like what if one of my friends is gay? Like kids don't naturally think about those things until you talk to them. And so like by you like sitting down and having those conversations, or any of you and your friends having those conversations with them is like I think the really important part to like breed out that ignorance and be like, hey, like here's why we don't do that. And it's like that's the important part is like, and they'll slowly learn, right? Like they might do it, they might make this mistake a couple times of using it when they're with their friends, but you know, as they start to think about those things and learn about those things, and they'll stop using it because they'll be like, okay, this is probably not a good thing. I think that's so important. And again, like we talk about that ignorance piece like so much, where it's like, man, if like a kid, like even for kids now, it's like really hard to be like 16 on the internet and you say something dumb shit, you're gonna get canceled by the internet. And they're like, well, they're 16, they should have known. It's like I think you guys forget how young 16 is. Like we see
And
16
see,
as like teenagers, and like I wonder if like media has played it all into this because all of our media shows of like teenagers right now are like super like either hypersexualized or hyper like, you know, making them into like adult-ish type shows. And it's like I think we forget that like the kids in real life who are 16 are not like the kids you see on like Riverdale and Euphoria. Like
yeah,
that's
those people are like in their
like
20s playing teenagers
yeah.
most of the
And
time.
like
Like
those
they're
scripts are
adults
not
playing
written
teens.
based on like actual 16-year-olds.
Yeah,
I'm like, I remember being 16, okay? It was not
yeah,
that long ago for me. There
yeah,
is no
and
way I
like
would expect like a 16-year-old like I remember Charlie D'Amelio did something stupid and people like ripped her to shreds. I'm like, dude, isn't she still like 15? Like she's a child. Like
yeah. And even like and one of the things too, like so that I give my nephews an avenue for and my nieces too, like an avenue for understanding those things. But when I was their age, like that wasn't open to me. Like if I was, no one ever corrected me when I was like, that's gay. Like if just saying that, like because you know that's how boys just referred to things that they didn't like or they were averse to. It was like, oh, that's gay. Like yeah, like the older men in my life, like my uncles and my father and all of those individuals, they'd be like, yeah, that's gay. Like
yeah.
reaffirm it. Like there was no avenue for
No, because that
discussion.
was the norm. Is like they were,
Yeah,
and at that point they probably were trying to belittle those things, right? Like they didn't want their kid.
yeah,
Like a lot of
yeah,
dads, like if their kid wanted to do like dance or ballet, like something like that, it was like instantly like, no, no son of mine is gonna be like doing that gay
Yeah, like,
stuff,
are you a
right?
fairy or what? Like,
Yeah,
that's like
exactly. And it was like,
literally what you would be told is like, don't be a fairy.
and
And
so what I want to kind of say about that, like with the socialization piece, like you were a sociology major, you know how much sometimes those early ideas make an impact on like lasting impacts, and to uningrain that in your head can be so hard. So when we like earlier we were talking about like the trans thing, was like some people are still coming to terms with that. It can be really hard to get rid of those early memories and early notions in your head. Like it's why so many gay people have a really hard time like coming around to their own ideas, because if your parent was homophobic at all, and that's ingrained in your head, it's going to be really, really hard to accept yourself, because that's been ingrained in you since you were a little kid. That's one of your early memories. That is not easily going to go away. So when we like fault people for being ignorant and like not knowing better, and like, or like not being up with the times and like what the newest progressive like notion is, and like, you know, where we're at in like a progressive center sphere, like how I talk to like my friends who are progressives, it's very different than how I talk to like someone like my dad, who's still a little bit more conservative, and like me and him have great conversations. However, I'm not going to talk to him the same way, because I'm not trying to get him to the same point that I'm trying to like get to with like people who are already progressive. And like you have to work really hard with like certain people, because these things are ingrained, and it's not easy to overcome that. And I think
yeah.
we still right now, it's like we act like, oh well, it's 2022, how can you still have these values? It's like, man, you have no idea what it's like to grow up like around family who might not have believed in these things, or like just like coming to terms with these things.
Yes, and putting like insane things like 20 like it's 2022 is like bro or sis,
Yeah.
like, or whatever you identify as. Like, don't you realize we still had people segregated at restrooms and water, and women weren't allowed people within like 80 years from here.
Yeah,
Like, it
it
wasn't
has
that
not been
far
that
in recent
long.
history that that's like it's not even that far.
It
Like, we
seems
think
like
that
yeah, sorry to cut you off, but I was like, it's funny because people will bring that up. It's like, oh, like women only got the right to vote like X amount of time ago, like, you know, or like, you know, slavery wasn't that long ago. Like I like, you know, had a great grandparent who was a slave, or like, you know, was under Jim Crow and stuff like that. We was like, oh, it's not that long ago. But then you turn around and say like, it's 2022, you should know better. It's like, you cannot. These are not compatible like ideas in your head. Like there's no way you can sit here and say, oh, well, this wasn't that long ago, but then turn around and be like, well, it's 2022, people should know better. It's like, if this
it,
thing is still so recent in history, getting those ideas completely out of society is gonna take time. Like you're not gonna breed it out overnight. It's even 50 years is not a lot of time in the grand scheme. That's less. That's like half of someone's lifetime sometimes.
well, here's an example in even more recent history. Like in the UK, it wasn't until like the 1990s that they like made marital rape
Mm-hmm.
illegal. Like they like before then it was like if you were married to a man, like
Yeah.
before the 1990s, you're married to a man, you are his property. So like if he wants to take and satisfy himself with your body, you cannot say no. Like
Yeah. There's no complaint. Like you can't
there's
complain about
no
that.
you just have, if he wants to take it and you don't want to give it, he still can take it, and there's nothing wrong with that legally. Like morally, ethically, yes, very much wrong. But from the system standpoint, they're like, what do you mean you were raped? That's your husband.
Yeah. Like, aren't you attracted to your husband? Don't you want to satisfy your husband? Like, I don't understand.
Yeah.
Like that
And
was really the
that was in the
idea.
1990s that they
Yeah.
finally were like, that's actually wrong.
Well,
Like,
yeah, it's like crazy. And like even here, like, do you know what residential schools are? Do you guys like, learn about that down there?
I don't know, so go ahead and
So
educate me.
residential schools in Canada, I think America had them too, but they were a big thing in Canada. It was the schools that Native kids were put in. They were usually taken from their families, ripped away from their families at a very young age, and put in these like very strict Catholic schools where they were beaten, tortured, and forced to assimilate into like the Western culture. And we talk about these things like they're so long ago. I don't know if you ever heard about the mass grave stuff that came out a couple years ago, or probably not even a couple years ago. About a year ago, we had like mass graves dug up here where they found a bunch of like where they're like excavated, and they're like, oh, we think there's a bunch of children's bodies here, and they found up to like hundreds. I think no, I think it's in the like many thousands now of like bodies they found, because like that's how badly these kids were treated. Like they were beaten, tortured, forced to learn the ways of like the white man, and then like a lot of times were killed. And it was a huge thing. So like residential schools were like where they were taken. And like it's one of those things that we talk about. It was like, oh, it was so long ago. The last one closed in 1996. That's a year before my brother was born. That was the last residential school closed.
recent history, and people just are
Yeah.
like they do that double standard where they're like, oh, like we're talking about these terrible things that are recent history, but they're like, oh, but it's also like we're in the 2000s now.
Yeah.
Like we should be we're in the Jetsons era. We got flying cars. We're good. We're beyond all of these things
Yeah.
that used to plague us in the 20th century. We're in the 21st now. Get with the program.
And
Like,
like,
but
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, I mean, like, but then they cherry pick, and
Yeah.
it is a contradictory cherry pick, right? It creates a paradox
Mm-hmm.
that they can't, like, you can't have one or the other. Like, if you believe it's in recent history, then you have to also accept that it takes time for people to accept these things, even if we're making progress in the right direction.
Yeah. And I just kind of want to like add, like, this is not to say that none of these beliefs are bad. Like, obviously, we know racism is bad and like homophobia is bad. Like, these things are probably just not good for society. Like, in general, like, obviously, from our perspective, like, we both think these things are bad. Like, they're not good ideas to hold. But at this, like, again, it's not one of those things that I would force someone to like accept overnight. Like, you can, for like my grandparents who, like, if you had to talk to them, like my grandparents who, came from India kind of thing, like, traditional people, if you had to try to get them on board with like the idea of a trans person, would probably like take a long time, and it's not something that you would ever probably get them to move their mind on, because they'll never understand it. Like, they're at that age that is not something that would ever like occur to them, that like that's normal. But to us it seems totally normal. But like these things just are going to take time to like convince people, to show people why this is like, why should we let people, and like people are like, oh, I shouldn't have to justify my existence. I'm like, I think we have, like, everything in our life we have to justify. Like, I'm sorry. It sucks. I don't want to justify my existence. You don't want to justify your existence. But there's people who don't want us to exist. And for us to move anywhere, like, to progress, to get anywhere in the future, we have to, like, justify these things. We have to say, like, this is why this is a good idea to let into society. This is why it's okay for people to marry their own sex in society. This is why it's okay to be trans in society. This is why we shouldn't be racist and segregate things in society. Like, you have to justify why these things are necessary and why things need to change. Like, and that is just the reality. It's like, because that's not what, like, how the society is right now, you are going to have to justify changing it. And that's something we have to accept, right?
Yeah, and that's with well thought out and well reasoned arguments, which gets back to your point of like when we're in that progressive mode and we are making like steps in the right direction, it is like you have to have that well reasoned and slow approach to it, because you will gloss over things if you don't, because when you're presenting this as an argument for change, you have to make a very convincing argument, and it can't just be like, oh, because it's 2022, that
Yeah.
like that's not just because it's a year doesn't mean that we're ready. But that we're having the discussion means that we're on the road. And if you're already saying, well, accept it because of this, like you're closing off the avenue to discussion, and now we're either stuck where we are or we start going backwards because people are like, you know what, fuck it, like I'm not even going to entertain it, and I was happy before, so let's just keep things the way they were. And that can happen. So that's why you do, like, when you present, it's like we're talking about it now. We're in an era where we're more we're more open, not necessarily accepting of ideas on the global scale, but like finally people are like, you know what, it was confusing to me as a younger person, but like I'm open to the discussion. And this,
Yeah.
like, from a personal example, I come from a very very like religiously conservative family, so like I was told like from the Bible, like being gay is wrong and to be fearful of gay people. And like I never would like go to a gay person or someone who identified as like homosexual or anybody in the LGBTQ plus community and be like, you're wrong. But like I was afraid, like, oh, like if I found out someone was gay, like they were automatically attracted to me. And like, how dare I even have that arrogance that
Yeah, right.
just because they're gay that they would find me attractive, right? Like that they would, like, their purpose in life is to like seize my body and make it theirs. Like how, like that's just wrong and
Yeah.
ignorant. And like I had to become aware of that and be like, oh, like just because they like guys doesn't mean that like I'm the guy that they like.
Yeah.
And it's not that they're actively recruiting either, right? Like
Yeah.
that's another thing that's like all gay guys are out there just to recruit you to be gay. And it's like
They're trying to turn the fucking frogs gay as fucking
yeah,
Alex
right.
Jones
It's like
would say.
no, like I have had like I have friends who are, and I've had them be flirtatious, but they respect my boundaries and they
Mm-hmm.
know that I'm not interested. But like at the same time, I'm like that you think that I'm attractive, like cool. Like I like that someone finds me attractive in the world, I can vibe with that. And like I can accept you. And it's like we understand that nothing's going to come of it, regardless. But like if it ever got to the point to where like they were forcing themselves, like then it'd be like okay, like we can't make this go on anymore. Like it would be any relationship, right? Like if there's a point where even I was like I've been uncomfortable with women before who have just been too aggressive. I'm like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
like I understand, like, but back off
Yeah.
because that's not what I want
I'm not
out of
into you
this.
like that. I'm sorry.
And vice versa. Like I've had that vice versa, right?
Yeah.
They're like, I don't want this. And I'm like, okay, like well, it doesn't always end the greatest, especially when you're young and you're learning what relationships are and how to deal with people. But like you come to realize that it's not like just the sexual preference of an individual, but it's like it's the personhood. Like
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to appeal to everybody, and even the people that you're attracted to that might share similar attraction to the opposite sex or same sex, that doesn't mean that you're the one subject of their affection, and they might not even care about it. It's like coming to terms with all these things. It takes so much time and so much understanding. But like you have to be open to it. Like I had to have the ability to stop myself and be like, I am super ignorant.
Mm-hmm.
Like I am aware of my ignorance, and now that I'm aware, I can't use that as defense.
Yeah.
I can't claim ignorance as a defense. So I'm gonna have to like consider this and like what can I do to change this, and like
Mm-hmm.
what are my reasons. And then I discover like, oh, like a lot of my reasons have like logical issues with them. These are not well founded, and that's not how I feel. Like I was a like conflicted with the values that I was taught, and not because like, oh, like maybe I'm questioning my sexuality. Like I've always been confident in that, but like questioning how to treat other people based off
Mm-hmm.
of their choices in life. And I'm like, that's wrong. Like I can't say like you're wrong in your life because I don't know what's best for
I
anyone
don't know
else.
what
So
your
I
life
I
is
barely
and
know
what your
what's best for
relationship.
mine.
Yeah, you don't know what their experiences are. You have no idea where they're at in their journey. I just want
Yeah.
to say thank you, Brooklyn Rob, for the follow. I also want to point out a couple comments here. Michelle said it's respectable for you to be able to go from that mindset to your current one, Sin. I completely agree. I want to say like it's really hard to take that first step to like educate yourself and like learn new things, and like step out of your comfort zone to like be to like especially as a religious person. I think it's really really hard to step away from that, because you feel like if you do, there might be some level of punishment for it.
Absolutely. The punishment is hell. Like
Yeah,
my stance is like
literally.
from the religious standpoint, like my stance is that I'm going to hell for this. And I'm like, you know what? Like if there's a creator out there who sings of universal love and acceptance, that for me to universally love and accept people and to emulate that love which they feel for all of humanity, then like then there's an inherent contradiction there. Like, so I'm being told not to love when I
Hmm.
should love everybody, but not everybody equally or at
Yeah.
all. And like that, there's a conflict in the doctrine. I'm like, that's like if hell exists and I'm going there, then I would think that I'm going there for the right reasons.
Yeah, exactly. Metamodal also said my first girlfriend was very aggressive and basically I gave into the relationship by virtue of the pressure. Yeah, that's super wrong, and I think like a lot of people like it's not. People always talk about like the idea of like pressure and consent when it comes to like sex, but I don't think people realize that it applies to so much more than just like the sexual interaction, but like just overall relationships and even friendships. Like that interaction of like consent can be like expanded so much further to like I don't really want to date you, but you're pushing me and pushing me and pushing me that I will like get into it because I feel like I have no options. Michelle also said my gay male cousin very often flirts with Rex. When he gets drunk, he's very flirty with me. Don't know why. Very, very interesting. He's super flirty with me when he's drunk. I don't know. He turns straight when he's drunk. I don't know what that is. Yeah, wasn't too bad, but I'm sure it shaped my expectations for sure. And I think, yeah, I think that's a hard thing. I definitely had a bad-ish experience in high school with a guy who like emotionally tried to manipulate me a bit. Especially, I was in a really, really bad place at the end of high school. Just my life was falling apart a little bit at the time. But he was super aggressive when it came to like wanting, he's like an 18-year-old boy. He wanted like what he could get out of me. And it was mostly like we would talk a lot in the DMs, but we wouldn't really talk much at school because I don't think either of us were like that type of person where we wanted like people to know. But he would like whenever I was really sad or upset, he would like ask me for like nudes and stuff because he's like I think at that point he thought like he could take advantage of like my mental state to like depend on him. I luckily never fed into that because I was like, you're such an ass. But people like, I think it did mess me up for like future of my life because like, again, when it came to dating, I was like super untrustworthy. And I think part of that was like trust issues from like men are just like, people are just going to use me. Like people just want me for this thing. And I think that's also why like I also fed into like I was more sex driven than date driven because I was like, I don't really want to date you. I just want to like hook up because I'm like, you can't use me if I'm using you, right?
Yeah. And I mean like but then we have problems of assigning value to ourselves because like in those situations and I've known individuals who are like that they're like my value is based off of like the physical things that people find appealing about me or the acts that I perform and that is how I identify and I'm like and that I don't view that as wrong but I'm like but at what point did it occur where you've associated like that you have to give someone like your body and that you have to do these sexual things to be appreciated and acknowledged as a human being like I think there's more profound ways to do it but I'm not going to say like your choice is wrong if you are such a person but it's unfortunate that like maybe there was a series of events that led to like that type of my like associating one's value with those acts and that's I mean like that's the whole thing it's like well you know like I'm trying to like wrestle and grasp with the idea of a universal love and like seeing people for more than just like what they can do for me and like and their like how they look or all sorts of other things where I'm erroneously assigning a value to them and not to their person
Yeah.
for reasons that have nothing to do with their personhood.
Yeah, I mean, it almost goes back to like I think one of the first conversations we ever had with like, is anything we do like truly selfless? I think is like is anything we do like truly not in our interest? Like, it's really hard to see people past like the point of like what do I want from them or what do I want with this person? And it's like we never really view it like from the other side of like how does this person want to be viewed and like we'll pick the things that we want to look at in someone and focus on those because it's like I really like how they look. I really like that they have a good career and I like that they're nice to me. But like we'll ignore the fact that like you know, maybe they don't like maybe they like blow up or have like explosive episodes or something, right? And it's like we'll start to focus on those things that we really like and we won't focus on anything else, I think. And I think that's like the dangerous like offside to that is like, yeah, we can get really infatuated with like certain things, but it means like you were talking about this earlier, the blindness to like other factors.
Yeah, and then you know people fall into that like they feel like if I do these things for someone, if I show them like my body, whether they're you know however they identify, they'll be like then I'm appreciated for it, and I'd rather be appreciated than not. And you know that's that because there's that reinforcement that like every time I do this, I'm appreciated, and so it reinforces that behavior.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think for so many, especially, I wonder how much like it's gotten worse over time, especially with like our generation. Well, I guess not so much with Gen Z, but the in between generations between like the Boomers and the Gen Y. I think it was Gen Y was after them, but like that hyper conservatism of like being super prudish and you're gonna like everything is valued on like your virginity and your purity to like the point where we are now where everything is like people want to be super sexualized and people want to like really like be all that and like especially with like media and stuff like social media like you want to put like people will put value on followers and likes and clicks and it's like this wasn't good like that idea of like all of our value comes from like this one thing of like your virginity, your purity, like how good you present. But I think we've gone to a different extreme of like sometimes your values being put on like like it's still what people think of you, but like how sexy are you, how appealing are you to people, especially on the internet. It's like how appealing are you on like social media. Like for these girls it's like they'll post like and I don't get me wrong, this is like I'm super pro sex work, I'm super pro like women taking advantage of their sexuality, but I think some women probably are taken advantage of by the system because they feel like that's the only way they can succeed is like by showing off my body and I have to do this to get valued by people in public.
Yeah,
And I think
and
that's
that
like
happens.
the hard part.
And that happens with men and women, but definitely happens more like disproportionately to women
Yeah.
than men. Like that seems to be kind of and like when it comes to things that are sexualized in media and things that we're bombarded with, it's typically like the woman that's got the beautiful body, scantily clad, and just like
Yeah.
perfect beauty is the one that's selling the product, because like that's the sexuality that sell. Like, yeah, there are
Yeah.
like, guys with shirts off, and sometimes they run the commercials with like the brawny man or whatever, like shirts off. What is his name? Terry Crews, like those types of individuals out there who are like objectively attractive,
Yeah.
masculine, muscular men that, that they put out there for the same reasons. But like definitely disproportionately, like women are expected to
Yeah.
be able to do things, be valued for those things. But like also like same when it comes to like, if like there's nothing wrong with embracing your sexuality. You like, the only thing I'd be like is like, hopefully that's not the only thing you assign your personal value to and gain it from is your sexuality. But like if you are aware of your sexuality and you embrace it, and it's because like my sexuality is inherent to me, it is part of me, it is part of who I am, and is how I express myself in the world, like fine, like absolutely, like if it if
Go gung
if it
ho,
does pay
yeah.
the bills, yeah, like you probably make more money than that with that than working a 9 to 5 than you'll be miserable with. And as long as you're like okay with what you do, and you're not like forced into it by someone else, like a significant other who's forcing you to do these things for the sake of making money. Like if you're comfortable with it, then why not? Like who am I to tell you no? Like unless you come to me and be like, am I doing the right thing? And they'd be like, well, I don't know if you're doing the right thing, but we can talk about it. Like something's bothering you clearly. Let's
Yeah.
see if you can decide for yourself whether or not you want to continue on in this direction or not.
No, for sure. I think like you were saying, like with I kind of latched on to the point about like, men in like media and stuff like that. Like you're saying, like Terry Crews is like a very like, appealing man. But I think the difference is like sometimes with men, it's like, yeah, he's also really sexually appealing, but I don't think that's the only thing he's valued for. Whereas I sometimes see women in media and like the only thing they're valued for is how they look. Like I think this happened a lot with like people like Megan Fox, who is super hot, super sexually appealing, and she was not valued for much more than that throughout her career. And I think that was like the like super hard thing, is she probably wanted to be like a really good actress, but I don't think she was ever going to get recognition for that in her lifetime.
Yeah. And I mean that happens, right? Like they assign, like, not like, people are assigned their value based off of their, especially when it comes to female actors. And that's like one of the things that I'm like learning to come to, like, is to identify like actors or actors. Some actors are male, some actors are female, some identify as others, but like I'm trying to remove, if I'm allowed, like the dichotomy, the separation between like there are actors who get paid more and actresses who like that, but like they are all acting together. They may identify differently, but like I appreciate their talents. But yeah, a lot of people are like, oh, like you only got the job because you're pretty, and sometimes that's the case. But there have been instances where like they are both good looking and talented, and like on the opposite side of the spectrum is like with that's been bringing a lot of attention is like Tom Brady retiring. And when I look at that man, I'm like, brother, you have a supermodel wife, you are a handsome man, and you're talented. Like I appreciate and I'm envious of you, because like I look at you and I'm like, you are all the things that like I don't like have in my life. And it's not like I want a supermodel wife, but I'm like I would be less willing to see Tom Brady lose in a football match if he was ugly and talented, rather than just like chiseled supermodel, like good looking man. Like you have everything at your like every tool at your disposal, and it's but he's good looking and talented. And why can't women also be good looking and talented? No, it's just
Now I gotta
because they're
find out
good
what Tom
looking.
Brady
And
looks
it's
like. Sorry, this is like a weird tangent. I actually don't think I know what he looks like.
oh, well, he's an attractive man. He's a very handsome man.
Oh,
Uh, and
okay.
he plays for the Tampa Bay Bucks. Used to be the quarterback for the Patriots.
He's
American football
like,
stuff. But
he's definitely like conventionally attractive, I would say.
yeah, right. But like
I don't think
it's
I would
enough.
ever personally be attracted to him. But I can see how people would probably be really attracted to this guy.
Yeah,
Interesting.
right. But it's like, but for like being a guy that's put it like growing up, people like that would make me jealous, because I'm like, how can you like be a good looking guy and also the valedictorian and the star of the football team? Like, why are you allowed to have all of these things? And it's like, well, actually, like maybe like the circumstances that they were born, like the chance that they were born attractive, but like they worked hard at everything else.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. I think people super disregard some of that hard work now too. Is like, for women, I think like there's times where like obviously like it kind of goes back to like they're only valued for their sexuality thing too even. But like if a girl gets like promoted in a workplace, a lot of times people look at her like, oh, she got promoted because the boss wants to sleep with her, or she slept with the boss. There's no way that there's anything else that like she couldn't have worked hard for. And it's like maybe people did work really hard. And same with guys, it's like a lot of times like you'll look at like the hot guy and it's like, well, he puts a lot of effort into like looking good, he dresses nice, and then he like grew up playing sports, he like worked really hard to get really good at football, and he made it. Like but he worked his ass off to get there. And like we just think like, oh, these people are just handed a good set of cards. And it's like you might be handed a good set of cards, but that doesn't mean that you're going to get to the top like he did, right?
yes, exactly.
And people
And
super
it's like
disregard, I think, all that hard work a lot of times.
they do, and like, but then that's something that again, typical like standard convention, breaking old thought processes, realizing where I was wrong, like having those thoughts as a young person, like thinking that like, oh, like especially when it came to women, like, oh, she's only getting this because of her looks, and just dismissing any of the other talents or sacrifice. And then it's like getting to know them, like as I'm growing older, and like like they're like, I work 3 jobs. I have no time for like there are examples like that where they have no time for relationships. They're just focused on their work. They're focused on their studies, and it's like then you realize like, oh, so much more goes into this than just looks. Like this person is like sleep deprived, trying to pay their bills,
Yeah.
doing well in school because they're essentially just like using whatever time they have to focus on that
Yeah.
task. And it's like, oh, it's definitely not just like being pretty probably helps in some regard for some things, but that's definitely not what's carrying them.
Yeah, absolutely. Metamoto said I got the worst cards but one on the flop. I mean, what a come up. That's the other thing is like, I think like for someone like you, people might turn around and be like, oh, they just got lucky. And it's like, I don't, like, I hate ascribing anything to luck because I think like nothing, well, I think there's probably some things in life that come down to luck, but like, I think a lot of times is like, people have to work hard, especially for that come up. And it's like, oh, he got lucky with business. Like, not that I support a lot of these billionaires because of like, ethical practices and stuff. However, you look at someone like I don't, what was his name? Fucking Bill Gates, who like started off in his like garage kind of thing, like, or Steve Jobs, who started these companies off in their garage, and like they had like they had nothing to start with, and they like built up something so amazing. And it's like people are like, oh, they just got lucky, or like they had like they had this benefit or that benefit. It's like, yeah, but that even with those benefit like small benefits, like you had to be work really hard to get to the point that they're at. And yeah, I don't like when people ascribe a lot of things to luck too.
Yeah, like the biggest RNG you have is where you were born. Like that's the big thing right there. Like the first big thing is
Yeah.
where you're born. It does determine a lot of what's available to you. And that does suck because there's pretty huge disparity around the world and you can see it. But just saying like, oh, you were just lucky and just dismissing all of the effort that had to go into it, that's not right, because you have to really examine it. It's not black and white. It's not just the stars just aligned. And it's like, for me, whenever I've had success in anything, sometimes there's a little bit of like being in the right place at the right time, but there's a lot of sweat. Like my friend, like especially in my gaming communities, like I'm not the best, but I'm a sweaty tryhard. And part of what makes me successful is that like I'm persistent and I keep trying and I want to get better for my own sake and I want to become successful at this. So like I'm here putting in a lot of hours and like not with any type of like, if I make this something that is successful as a platform and it's something that's able to sustain my life, that's not for a lack of putting in hours. It's not like I log in, say hi to everybody for 5 minutes, collect $7,000 in ad revenue, and I'm like, peace out. Like that's part of the whole getting back to relationship. Like I can't be in a relationship because I'm dedicating 60 to 80 hours of my life and prior to like my 1 month break visiting family and like deep introspection and reflection to see if I'm on the right path, like, and ultimately deciding to come back to it. Like my life is dedicated to this. I can't break up with it. Like if I want this to succeed, that need and want of something romantic that
It's on the
has to
back
go by the
burner.
wayside. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Like if at the end of it I become wealthy, and that's the dream of anybody who does such a thing, then I have time to like indulge those things because now I don't have to worry about like financials or anything of the sort. Like then yeah, maybe. But like right now, my community is my love. The people that come and see me. Like I don't like I have like I think like 350-ish followers,
Yeah.
but there's probably about like 10 or 15 of those people who come in pretty consistently
Yeah.
and hang out and chat and interact with me. And it's like they're here to hang out with me and to be here and to support this endeavor. So for me to just be like, nah, like your time's not important, like at all, like
Yeah.
that's wrong. And so I have to be committed to them. I have to engage them. I have to care about them, and not out of obligation, but because I do. And then if I have someone else who's like, oh, well, you're spending too much time on the internet, you don't have enough. Like those are all things that I just rather not deal with. And the best way to
Yeah.
not have to deal with that is to not be in a relationship. And like I realize like that's the sacrifice I have to make in order to obtain something. You must like give up something of like equivalent exchange to be an effing nerd and like do like the Full Metal Alchemist quote. Like, but that's true. Like I can't expect to have something great and give nothing up in exchange for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that trade-off is is something that a lot of people have trouble with, because I think everyone, especially now, I think I find like there's a lot of like the entitlement, and I don't know how much I see it in Gen Z and millennials, but I do like I don't know how much more I see it in Gen Z and millennials just because I'm like around them versus like every other generation. But there's entitlement piece of like, especially with the progressive movement that I see, is like people want everything and not have to like put in a lot for it. So it's like people want like, we need better housing, we need like, I should have universal basic income. And they think like all these things are good, which I agree. There's probably ways to implement these things, but like to say that these things should just be implemented, and again, it goes kind of go back to the conversation earlier where we were saying like pushing things through without actually thinking of like the consequences and how to do these things, and just saying, well, this is good, so we should do it, can become really like difficult, because it's like, well, we'll start pushing things through and then like the consequences will come later, but at that point it'll be too late because we've already pushed it through, and now like we're seeing like what the fallout from that is. So like, yeah, it's like, people want like the whole student loan forgiveness in the States, and it's like, okay, great, but like that's like you guys already have like a massive debt. Like if you forgive student loans right now, like you're gonna really fuck a lot of people, or not a lot of people, but you're gonna fuck your economy, because like that money needs to come from somewhere. And same thing with like universal basic income. It's like, okay, are you okay with your taxes going up? Like I know you're okay with taxing billionaires, but if your parents make more than like 90K combined, your taxes are going up. Are you okay with that? If you're someone who's like a young person in a good job market, like, maybe you're making more than 90K or 100K a year, and you're just young, but like, you're living in a city like California where that 100K is barely getting you by even. Are you okay with your taxes going up? Like, it's all these things is like people don't think about how these will affect on a broader scale. And I think they just want to do it. And it's like, I get it's a good idea and you really like the idea of like helping people, and it's admirable. But the reason Biden didn't forgive student loan isn't because he hates students and hates young people and doesn't care. It's because it's a big job to like push that through. It's not something that they could do overnight and just like be like, okay, it's gone, debt gone. Like that's not how it works.
Oh, it's because it's like financial institutions are depending on those loans to be repaid because like they could collapse otherwise, and they're only federally insured up to a certain amount, and it's not enough to cover like everybody. Just like all of a sudden the government's saying, yeah, you don't got to pay it back.
Yeah.
It's fine. And those institutions are like, what do you mean you don't have to pay it back? Like we were expecting for that to come back with interest, so that way we can reinvest it in other things and like have money for people to come in and apply for a loan to get a car or a house. And now we're closing the branch, and I like it's really super complicated, right? It's way more nuanced than you think, and that's anything that we're trying to progress on, and especially like with like the complexity of relationships, because it's not just the relationships that we have with each other, it's the relationships that we have with the systems we live in, and the care that's required for both. And yeah, we have this problem with entitlement. Like people do come onto this platform and they're like, yeah, I'm a streamer, why am I not a millionaire already? Like I've streamed a couple of days of Fortnite, how am I not rich? PewDiePie is rich. Like why is he so lucky? Like do you like, and he's one of my favorite examples of like YouTube stars. I'm like, do you realize like he never like when he goes on vacation, people are like, why? Like, why are you taking a break? Like he uploads every day. He's dedicated to his community. I'm like, he's got yes, he's wealthy, but like now he has a payroll that he has to tend to. He has editors and all these other things that make his content possible. I'm
Yeah.
like, he's probably putting in easily 60 to 80 hours a week
Yeah.
into uploading new things for you to see every day. And it's not because he's like, sure, there's a little bit of serendipity that goes into it. There's never any doubt of that there's always a little bit of luck, but it's not the determinant. Like people like him are busting their ass to make it possible, and if they go away, like there's like, and I learned that from taking a month off for just like introspection to decide if this is the right the right decision to make. Like there's no guarantee that people are going to come back. Like once you leave and they feel like they've been abandoned or they've been jilted, there's no lack of anywhere else for people to go.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
they can find another streamer. So you just open up browse, and that's all it takes.
Yeah.
And
There's like hundreds of thousands of people like streaming at any
Yeah.
time at
Yeah.
any point. So it's like it's not an easy thing, especially with like YouTube and Twitch. Like these are such hard markets to dive into, which is why I wasn't like super like into it for like making money. I just really want to get into the politics stuff. But like if someone's like going into this with the idea that like I'm gonna like do streaming as a career, don't go into it with that mentality. Don't go into YouTube and streaming with the idea that you're gonna like make a career out of this, because that is a really hard thing to do, especially now that the market is so like saturated. Like at the time
Yes.
PewDiePie started, YouTube watching people play video games was not a normal thing. When Twitch came around and like people like the big Twitch game players, it wasn't that common for like that to be a normal thing for people to do or watch. There wasn't that many people in the market. Not that it was easy for them, but it was easier then for them to become big because there wasn't a lot of people doing it. But if you go into that like with it, and so they also didn't go in with the mentality that they were going to make money, obviously, because it wasn't a thing to make money back then. But if you're going into that with that mentality now, it's like you're going to have a lot of competition, and this is not an easy field to make money, not a livable wage at least.
Yeah, you can get to that point in time, but it takes tremendous effort. Like for me, like this is what I do full time. But for 2 years before this, I busted my ass working shit jobs because I wanted to ensure that when I took time to dedicate to this, that I wasn't like working a 9 to 5, having to worry about my work scheduling. Oh, I can't stream today because I have to go to work, or like this, that, or the other reason. Like I made sure that I had substantial amount of resources set aside to be like, I can pour myself into this as though it is like my full, and I'm no stranger to it either, because I think I mentioned before, like I used to own a small business in my late 20s and early 30s. I was married to that job. Like I went in, like our normal hours were from 10 to 7, 10 a.m. to 7 p.m., 5 days a week on Sunday, noon to 5. I was there at 6 or 7 a.m. every day, leaving at 10 p.m.
Yeah. That's
And people
crazy.
are like, oh, they're like, must be so easy to like be your own boss. And like, actually, like,
That is like
if
one of
you
the
are
hardest.
undisciplined, that you are your own worst enemy.
Yeah.
Because there are people that I've met that like have had businesses and they fail because they just don't show up. They don't show up and they don't commit. And they're like, dude, I only got to put in like 20 hours a week. Or I'm like, no. I'm like, if you have a relationship, it's going to be
gone.
taxed. If you have kids, they're not going to see you as much.
I think
And
sorry, with this whole like anti-capitalist movement that's like been going on, like a lot of people are like socialists and they hate business owners and stuff, and I'm like, they're like, oh, business owners just like make profits off the people they employ, and I'm like, yeah, maybe at big corporations, but if you've ever been to a small business, holy shit, those people work fucking hard. People who own a business, you do not get any time for yourself. If you're running a business, you have no time for yourself.
no. And that was like one of the most satisfying things about being a business owner. And like one of the most satisfying things that like I have extra resources right now is that most notably back then, my friends and my family, like if people were like in between jobs or having a hard time and like I had a really good month or something like that, I could be like, hey, like come and work for me. Like just handle the register, make sure the store's clean, like attend to the customers, like do whatever needs to be done. And there are people who have been like, they're like, yeah, man, if it wasn't for you during that time, I don't know how I was going to make it. And it's like, I have the means to help you so I'm going to like I'm not going to ignore you and be like, oh, like these people don't matter for the sake of my money. I realized what I had set aside, and there was plenty enough left over to distribute more. But like I didn't just hand it out for free. Like I'm like, you want the money, come work for me.
Yeah,
And they'd
for
be like,
sure.
yeah, okay.
But
And
you
they
had
liked
that
working
like,
for me, like
yeah,
because I treated them well.
for sure. Yeah, no, the whole idea of like I'm in a good place now, so I can help you out was like a great thing, and I wish like I I think there's a lot of people who are like that, and like once again to a good place. I think that's a so much better thing than like just doing a handout and being like, here, I'm gonna take care of you. You can come live with me for a month. I'll pay for stuff like until you get back on your feet. It's like, hey, come work for me, make your own money, you'll be back on your feet in no time, kind of thing.
Yeah, and but then you get those sensational examples where people like, oh, like people are pissing in bottles at the Amazon warehouse because they can't take breaks, and it's like, yeah, there's that's wrong. Like that's not good business practice. Like they're not being treated like they're just another piece of machinery and property at that point. It's like that's not all business owners' approaches. But like as you become more exponentially wealthy, then those terrible things occur, and then like you become removed from it. Like I don't think like I don't know Jeff Bezos like anything other than what I see in the media, but I'd have to reckon now that like he's like one of the wealthiest people in the world.
Yeah, I think he
He's
is.
pretty far removed from like what the average Joe does. Like
Yeah.
he has the life and the leisure to do whatever he wants and ignore like the plight of the standard person because that doesn't apply to him anymore. But like for me, I prefer like even in the times of great plenty when I was like in charge of my business, I was still there
Yeah.
because if I take my eye off of what's in front of me, I'm going to lose it. Like it's gonna get
Yeah.
away and I'm not gonna be able to recover it. So I had to always stay dedicated. And I've got satisfaction in that because I was there and I was producing an establishment that people wanted to keep coming back to and that they would spend time with me and support it. And like that's what I get from Twitch as well. Like the people that come in, it's like I have a nice community like that even when I'm not playing Dead by Daylight, they're still coming in and like watching me play Final Fantasy 14. And it's like maybe they don't care that about the game, but they're engaging me in the conversation.
Yeah,
and,
they
like,
want to be
when
here
I'm
with
not,
me.
right. And it's like I'm deeply appreciative of that because they're making it possible. Like sometimes they donate like, subs or bits, but like I'm never like because you're here, pay subs. Like I gift subs to my community because I'm appreciative of them and I'm like, like you're here all the time. Maybe, you shouldn't have to deal with ads. Like
Yeah.
I see that you're dedicated and I appreciate you and it's you make like
Thank you for supporting
no
me
one's
just being here.
yeah. Yeah, like if no one's here, then what's even the point? So that people come in and they spend hours of their day with me, like I appreciate that and I value that. And it's like I feel like that doesn't happen enough. Not just like in Twitch, but I mean in general that like especially within relations, like there's that problem of appreciation and respect and like acknowledging like the sacrifice and the appreciation, like giving not for the sake of something in return, but like because you genuinely appreciate those around you. And it's like, I'm going off into the weeds here, so you
That's
better
okay.
bring this back.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I guess I'll respond to a couple comments because I missed Metamoto's comments here. But lately, it comes in sneaky tactics like to your health or your reproductive rights. I think that goes back to I think that was from the conversation where we were talking about like pushing certain policies through without thinking them through entirely, or wanting to push policy through without thinking them through entirely. Yeah, seeds. Yeah, I don't know where we're going with this. Maybe we'll switch gears a little bit because I do kind of want to get back into, I guess, more of like the social aspects.
Yeah.
Especially you being a sociologist, I think we'll just maybe switch gears a little bit. What do you think? Do you think that like, how do I phrase this? Do you think like new age media and social media and these type of platforms have had a negative influence on how people interact with each other?
Well, I'd say that it's the person who believes in balance, that there's equal measure in both directions, like equal and opposite, right? Like it's both equally as positive and as negative. They're in equal capacities in either side. It just depends but that it is more infectious than ever, like the negative things, because it's like what the idea of things going viral, like
Mm-hmm.
when bad things go viral, they spread more, like exponentially more quickly than
Mm-hmm.
they used to in the past, and not just from like pathogens, just like behaviors, whether positive or negative, like the potential for things that are negative to
Mm-hmm.
just go, like, to explode out of control, for people to have negative views of themselves, of negative views of others, and
Yeah,
like those things are more infectious than ever.
that's kind of where I was going with this because I think just to quickly sidetrack, fuck you, Sterling, leave, leave, leave. Sterling's one of my friends. But yeah, he's funny. Yeah, because what I wanted to kind of go is like that whole idea of like, especially like politically, the division has become really intense. I think I've seen it in like interpersonal relationships, and there's also like a broader like societal interaction with each other. Like, so like if you're like online and you're in like especially political spheres or social activism spheres and like those type of places on the internet, it can be really really easy to like slip into echo chambers and like all you hear is your own narrative, and anytime you hear somebody outside that narrative you can get really really angry, and you can think that person's immediately a bad person because they don't align with your views, because you think like your community represents the broader population. You're like, this is like the mainstream idea, this is what everyone believes in, but you forget that there's like a broader world out there and that it doesn't just exist in your social media bubble. Because like I think people forget how much social media tailors to what you like. So people will go, it's like, oh well, it's not just like my following page, it's like my explorer page also has all this, like most people agree with this, and it's like, yeah, that's because it's tailored to you. So someone who's like on a different, like, you know, maybe believes in different things, they're gonna see a lot different of a main page, and they're gonna think that a lot more people agree with them. And so I think it's like negatively influenced how people interact with each other because they automatically assume that anyone who disagrees is really really wrong. And it's like, you're a bad person, like you don't know what you're talking about, you're just wrong, you're spreading misinformation. And again, this is like something I see on both sides, and I used to think it was like, especially as being like a little leftist, I was like back in my like mid to late teenage years, it's like I was like always thinking this about like right wing people or like conservatives, where I was like, oh, they like, you know, they're racist, they don't like gay people, like they just want to like keep the status quo, they don't want people to like do what they want. And then as I got older, it was like, okay, I like level out a little bit and I started to see the other side. And it's like they probably think the exact same thing of like anyone who's trying to progress things is like they're trying to destroy the culture, they're trying to like, you know, break people apart, they're trying to like ruin us and stuff like that. Like they're gonna think the exact same thing. Like no one really like ever wants the destruction of society. Everyone thinks they have the best ideas, but because everyone creates their own like little echo chambers online, it's like really easy to fall into thinking that like your idea is the right one, anyone else, and like you'll be like not touted, support, I guess support it. There's a word I'm looking for here. Um, I guess echoed. That's why it's called an echo chamber.
It's so it reinforces your
There you go.
viewpoint.
That's the word I was thinking of. Reinforces. Is like you'll be reinforced if you call the other people bad. Like you're a bad person, and like everyone on your side will be like, yeah, you get them. You're right. They're a bad person. It's like everyone's so quick, especially on like platforms like Twitter. Super bad for that. Like because dogpiling constantly happens. Whereas like someone gives one take that a bunch of people don't agree with, that whole community will just dogpile them until they like either quit social media or like double down, and then like all of a sudden it becomes something so much worse. Yeah, we'll address that first because I also want to get into like the personal aspects of how I think it's like issuing. But if you want to respond to that first.
So for me, yeah, I do believe that like the ability to enter into an echo chamber, again, it makes things that are negative and that are detrimental
Mm-hmm.
spread much more quickly and become reinforced much more easily, because now these people who would spread these views on whatever side they align themselves on, they can basically like form a faction, and
Mm-hmm.
then eventually, as people are searching around and looking for a place to belong, they will find that, and then it's like, yeah, it's like we're in agreement here. Like, so if someone messes with you, they mess with all of us. Like, there's that idea, right? Like, you mess with one of us, you mess with everyone, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like that's I take that approach with my friends. Like, if someone does like insult my friend in front of me and they're like, you're ugly or you're stupid or whatever, and whether they're a guy or a girl, it's like, and if they they or whatever they identify as, like that I have to keep, like that's something that's new to me too, is like being mindful that people identify as more than just like the binary that we were
Yeah, for
taught. So I
sure.
have to be mindful and respectful of that, and I embrace it, I accept it. Like I want
Yeah.
people to live as they would want to live in this world, because like, again, like we don't know if we got another shot at this, so why not live life to the best of your
Yeah.
satisfaction and happiness with it, like as long as you're not like being like Hitler or something crazy.
Yeah, if your
But
satisfaction
anyway,
is taking out a whole race, like
yeah,
sect of people,
yeah,
probably not a good way to live.
yeah, probably not a good way to live. But it if they don't stick up for themselves, and yeah, like there's that part of me that's like, because I care about them, not because like I align with their values of like, oh yeah, because we believe in the same thing. That's, it's like because I care about them, and if I see them being mistreated, then yeah, I'm gonna like step up and I'm gonna like step in front. And if they can't take it themselves, I'll be like, yeah, like because I care about you. And if they're like, just stop, like back off, I'll be like, okay, like if that's what you want, but like please try not to let this happen again. But like in those situations, they dogpile on you because they're like, we share the same views. It doesn't matter if the other person's actually got a point. They're just wrong because they're wrong. So we're just gonna
Yeah.
just just pile on them and destroy them, and they do, and that's wrong. And for me, like I tend to put things in video game terms a lot, because that's the kind of that's the kind of store that I owned. That's my upbringing. Like I've always been a gamer. Like that whole mention of like when my parents used to take me to their shop, and I had my like it's always been like my occupation is like what's kept me preoccupied and entertained. And it's like when I play games, especially competitive games, things that require like thought and reason, my initial and like where I stand politically is in the middle. Like because the middle is the, like you get to the middle, you have to defend that for like 5 ever
Yeah.
straight up, because
Yeah.
you're beset on all sides from opposition, and you can't just like be like, okay, like I'm gonna fight on all of these fronts. You're like, okay, like I need to understand my position way more. Like I have to be way more delicate with what I say and how I approach people, because like I might be able to bring more people into the middle, or
Yeah.
if I can't, I might be able to get along with those people who are surrounding me and not have to constantly be like defensive. And that means that like being in the middle, I have to be like more well reasoned. I have to take, and I have like more of a philosophical approach too. I have a philosophical curiosity. Some people just want to be right,
Yeah.
and they'll find those communities where they find their rightness, and that's all that matters. But for me, like I like conversations like this, I'm like, this is a journey into the abyss for me. And I'm like, I don't know what's here in the dark, but I'm looking and I'm searching, because I want more. I want to understand the
Yeah.
vastness and the
I want to
infinite
get
magnitude
closer
of
to that
this.
like truth. Like I don't know what the truth is, but I want to get closer to it, and the only way you can do
Yeah.
that is by continue to explore and continue to like push what you think is right and like challenge yourself. And I think that's like part of the problem with like these online communities is like as soon as you fall into like an echo chamber or you fall in like with a certain group, it becomes really really hard to challenge other people or challenge yourself, because you feel like it almost becomes like culty, like religionish, where like if you question, you're out, you're done, you're gone, right? And
Yeah.
you'll get like excised really quickly. And I think that's like a really bad mentality. Yeah, you can respond to that, and then I kind of want to push this into one other topic before we switch to like the interpersonal stuff.
Yeah. So like, that's, I mean, that's pretty much my view, is that like, that is probably the most problematic part of the internet and its virility, or not virility, that's something else entirely, but like, but being infectious and contagious is that it spreads the wrong things too easily. And when it comes to like political nature, like me being in the middle, and people are like, especially with how tense it was in the States with, you know, Trump and Biden and the election being disputed, people are like, so are you like Republican or Democrat? And I'm like, I'm
People,
nonpartisan. Like
yeah,
I don't declare either. And they're like, who did you vote for? I'm like, when I go to the ballot, I vote for the people that align most with my views, like that I think are making the right choices. And sometimes there's a D next to the name, sometimes there's an R next to the name, sometimes there's an independent or an MP. Like sometimes there's letters that I've never even seen before. And I'm like, it's because like I am carefully considering their views and their positions and not their ideology.
yeah.
Like,
How is this going
and
to
that
affect broader society, not just me? Like, it's not just what I think is the right thing to do. It's like what I actually have like deliberated and
Yeah.
considered and what is going
Yeah,
to be best for like everyone.
because I'm deeply aware that I have to exercise care in this position. Yeah, I'm just like one voice among many, but like I understand that this is a care process and that like
Yeah.
my decision could be something that influences the outcome. And I don't want to make it based off of something that I didn't come to the conclusion myself with my own carefully, carefully like research, my own careful research and reasoning that I just said like, yeah,
Yeah.
like this is the right choice. And if I have no knowledge about it, it doesn't matter what the letter is next to the person. I just it's like not specified or whatever. Like I just don't vote for it because I can't make an informed choice on it. So like why I'm not going to leave something that could potentially change the way of how people around me live on a coin flip.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's like as Metamoto said, I hate the hyperpolitical types that instantly try to box you into something. It's like, my views can't be fit into a box, and like everyone's gonna box me somewhere else. So like if you ask my dad's gonna think I'm like a far left, like, you know, lib baby, like kind of thing, right? Like he's gonna think I'm like the leftist you can get. But then I go online and I talk to other people who are leftist, and I'm like, holy shit, I sound like right wing next to you. Like it's crazy, and it's like I'm like losing my mind sometimes because I'm like, I thought I was like pretty left wing, I thought I was pretty progressive, and then I'm like, there's some people I'm like, well, I don't agree with that, and then they're like, oh, and then they're like, yeah, people who don't agree with this are fascists, and I'm like, oh shit. I was like, okay, there's people who like think I'm a fascist for not like agreeing. Like, holy crap.
Right?
It's like
Because
this like
they
really like
box you in so quickly.
it's so quick. It's like you have one disagreement and you're like, you're a Republican, you're a Nazi, you're a fascist, or like on the other side, it's like, you know, holy shit, super left wing positions are for the terminally unyoung. Yeah, I think so. I think there's like a whole bunch of that where like people who like have these super extreme views, they're probably mostly online, like they're not acting like that in their day to day life. But even so, like to like our online community is becoming so much more influential in our like everyday lives and like actual politics that it's kind of scary to see like what people are pushing for online. And it's going the same thing in the other direction where like I think like online communities have festered in like the right wing, and now all of a sudden you have like actual Nazi groups, like neo-Nazi groups coming back, and people who are like alt-right and traditionalists who like want to go back to like the subjugation of like women and segregation. And it's like we have like such different extremes that exist on the same platform, and it's like crazy to look at because you're like, how do you exist and how do you exist in the same space? Like, how has this happened? How have we gotten here? And I'm like, I'm sure there's people like this who existed before the online, but you can build it so much more online. Like these people were one off. Like maybe you had the two crazies in your community who were like, you know, shouting from the rooftop, the aliens are coming. But now it's like you have a whole 10,000 group chat of people who are like, the aliens are going to kill us. And it's like,
Oh yeah,
oh my
absolutely.
God.
So there's the couple of things like the one of the like controversial, often made fun of is like the flat Earth societies. Like
Yeah.
that's a very infectious, um, group of individuals that spreads and people do believe in it. And then there's like the most dangerous thing that happened though within like very recent U.S. history, was the like the raid on our state capitol. And under normal circumstances, say if this was like 30 years ago, before the internet, something like that to occur would be much more difficult to organize because it would be like a grassroots effort. Like you would actually have to be like finding these people like at bars and
Yeah.
cafes that you connect with and build a group where you have to call each other on the phone, you have to make flyers, you have to send physical letters, like
Yeah.
to organize something of that scale
And now you're
is
like, I can type into my browser flat Earth community, and the first Facebook that pops up, it's like, all right, I'm joining that one, and there's already a
yeah, and
thousand
it's
other
like
members.
300,000 people are already a member of this community. Like
Yeah, for sure.
it's, and then they're like, yeah, we're gonna have a convention. And then like since the community is so large, they probably do have someone in there who has access to a venue who can secure one. So it's like the planning, it's like just the networking, the capability is just so much. It's just like light speed. Like
Yeah.
you can make it happen with just like in the
Ex-
span of a very short amount of time when it used to like take a really concentrated effort
Yeah.
and it would take time, and you wouldn't like people would be like, yeah, we tried to put this thing together and like 10 people showed up, like, but now it's like easy. People are like, yeah, we're
Yeah.
gonna do it.
Extremism can like fester so quickly online. And I think that's like Let me just go through a couple of the comments here because we got a bunch of people jumping in. Let's see. Cloward Van said idealism has to curb where reality starts. Otherwise, the train wreck only piles higher. I agree with that. I think idealism has like kind of messed up our view on politics a little bit because everyone wants their ideal. So like again, I'm left wing, so I see it much more from the left wing. I don't know what all the ideas of the right are right now, the general, but like being online and someone who's in a left leaning community, it's like sometimes I'll see things like the whole student debt forgiveness. Like people think it's like such an easy fix, and I'm like, Biden's not like I'm Canadian and I even know like Biden cannot push this through as like an easy thing. Like this is not something that he's just gonna be like, oh, bill passed, student loans or student debt's gone, right? Let's see. Idealism can keep going beyond that, but usually not in the same reference frame. Like they would escape reality. Yeah, for sure. Lunatic says, hello, Rex. Hello. I've killed a few. Okay. That escalated quickly. And stepping on a live hamster. Hey, I've never harmed a hamster, by the way. Very glad I have guinea pigs. So I would prefer if we weren't killing small rodents. Boo, boring, boo, thanks. Appreciate it. But yeah, I think this has to go with like the, how much have you heard about like the truckers protest up here?
I've heard zero because I
Really?
have been pretty averse to like reading news. I didn't even know like my state was like due for another snowstorm until someone was like,
You see the
you're
first
gonna
snowflake
be
falling, you're like, that's weird.
yeah, I'm like, they're like, you don't know? I was like, no comment.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Okay, so like the big, let me just stepping on a live ham. My little sister had a pet hamster once, but something happened to it and had nothing. I'm sure. I wonder where your name came from. Anyway, yeah. So the truckers protest up here in Canada is a lot of our trucker workforce is our government basically put in a mandate saying that like if you're like you can't be like I don't know what the exact like bill was, but basically it meant that like if you go into the states or you can't cross the border into the states if you're unvaccinated. And it was like the same thing. The states put in a similar rule, like you can't cross back into the states if you're a unvaccinated trucker who like does a run to Canada. You can't re-enter into the states. And Canada put in a similar one. Well, obviously this like bothered a lot of truckers who weren't vaccinated, being like, hey, I'm gonna get fucked because I'm gonna lose my job for like a health decision I made. And not commenting, like I'm not going to comment on like what I think of vaccines and stuff like that. I think that's a whole other issue, but more it has to do with like labor rights in this sense. And like a lot of people and like you know the rights to protest. So like a lot of people are like, you know, we have a huge like you could probably go on Twitter right now and like one of the top trending tags is like the Canadian convoy or like the truckers convoy is like the big hashtag. And so there's a bunch of people basically driving across Canada into our into Ottawa where the Parliament is, and sitting outside like our buildings to like, and like they were sitting at the border to like stop trucks from crossing in protest of like the mandate, saying like, okay, if you're gonna like, you know, mandate us to like have a vaccine, then we're gonna like just not work and we're gonna like protest until you repeal this. Well, a lot of people are now angry at this because they're like, oh, you can't do this, like just get the vaccine, you're being a baby. And I'm like, okay, and they're like, you know, a lot of people are calling for the protest to be shut down and for the military to be involved. And I'm like, holy shit, you are so stupid. Because like, if you set this precedent of a protest you don't like or the government doesn't like is able to be shut down by government with military force, even though the protest, as far as I know, has been completely like peaceful. There hasn't really been much violence that broken out. There might be like, I know there was like the claims that they raided a homeless shelter was like the one thing, but that was a small group of people. Other people have actually been like handing out food. So there's a lot of good people. There's obviously a lot of bad people too. Like that's every protest. There's going to be like the idiots and there's going to be the really good people who are there for the right reasons. So like all of this stuff happened is like now people are calling for like this protest needs to be shut down. It's awful. These people are awful. There's like a bunch of racist people who are just like, you know, against health and against like the public and stuff like that. And they need to be shut down. And I'm like, you're setting a really bad precedent because you don't agree with these people's stance on the vaccine. You're saying like, oh, they shouldn't be allowed to work. They shouldn't be allowed to protest because they don't agree with my narrative. But I'm like, man, the next time that you have like a protest that you think is like important and the government decides that it's getting a little too rowdy or you're a little bit too much of a public disturbance and they don't agree with you anymore, you're giving them that power to like shut it down with military force. And I think that's the scary thing is people cannot see the other side of that of like, if you set this precedent here of saying like, oh, this is okay because we don't agree with it. We want the government to shut it down and it should be shut down because it's wrong. Well, if someone turns around and does that to you, I hope you're okay with it because that's the precedent you're setting, is like government can like step in and shut things down that you don't like. And I think that's the scary part of like people who are calling for the government to shut it down. And I know the government has talked about like using military force on them, and I'm like, I don't like that. I'm a little bit of a libertarian. I know Metamoto said fuck libertarians, but look, I'm a little bit of a libertarian. I really like the idea of like people being able to like live to the full extent without like, as long as it doesn't affect other people. And so with this whole protesting, it's like, I'm like, man, like truckers barely get out of their car. Like this was like the wrong group to go after and be like, you need to get vaccinated. We have like 10% of our truckers apparently aren't vaccinated. And it's like, that's such a small percentage, first of all. And B, these are people who like drive in a truck all day and don't interact with anybody else. Like even when you do truck drop-offs, you're not getting out of the truck most of the time. You back up into a landing and someone unloads it and then you drive back up. Why are we going after this group of people and saying like, we need to get you vaccinated or you can't work anymore? And it's like, you're stepping on someone's labor rights now, because like that's the other thing, is like all these lefties who are super pro labor rights, well, these people are advocating for their labor rights. They don't want their contract changed in the middle of your contract. People can't grandfather in rules that like you didn't sign a contract for. Like these people signed a contract, and one of the like there's no stipulation that like, oh, I have to be vaccinated, so you can't fire me, and if you do fire me, I want severance. But government's not willing to give that either. So it's like, it's this really hard thing of like, people are going really, really hard at this. And I'm just like, you guys need to be really careful with what you push here now. Sorry, that was a long rant just to kind of get that point, but I want you to like maybe engage with that a little bit, of like that like inability to see the other side, especially within these echo chambers.
Yeah. So for me, like, so one of, I'll give you a little bit of background on my stance when it comes to things like this. I believe in the right to peaceably protest. I think that is something that is necessary for a well functioning republic to sustain itself. Because if something is wrong or egregious and people perceive it as such, and they have good reason to do so, then as long as they are not like out causing harm and burning houses down and raising the land for the sake of like, you do what we want you to do, like make the change or we will destroy everything. Like that's at that point, like when the violence occurs is when there may be a need for, like we had that with people were not happy with the election, but like they believed very deeply in there was a call to action from the then like person who was like leading the country. So they're like, yeah, the president's behind us. We're like, it's like, right, if you're welcome to protest the results, and then you go to your representatives and you be like, please, like re-examine, like we're going to protest until you re-examine things, and like that's the approach. And like keeping the peace, that's important, but like you can't just be like, oh, because we don't like this thing that's occurring that we're going to use force. And one of the things that I do in my off time is like, I'm a super nerd. And one of the tenets of like my own martial disciplines, and I think everybody should have like something martial that they engage in, whether that's like not necessarily like self-defense, but something they enjoy that keeps them physically active and gives them the idea of like of familiarizing yourself with like your own personal safety and security is like my greatest tenet, and something that I've enjoyed and probably deeply influenced by like playing The Legend of Zelda, is swordsmanship. And it's like, when you have like when you're someone who carries a sword, or you are a practitioner of the art, you like the first tenet of such a practice is like, this option should always and forever be the very last option when everything else has been exhausted. Like you use every effort to make peace and use diplomacy as necessary, and if there is no other avenue to resolve the problem, you are saying that like the death of one of us is the only thing that is going to solve this issue. And that is something that I think people like trivialize. They're like, oh, like whether they have like any type of skill with blades or guns or any type of weaponry or self-defense, they're like, because I'm powerful and because I'm stronger, because I have this weapon, like I just can wave it around and I'm right. And it's like, no, it's like you're not respecting the tenet of what this thing is. These things are designed as weapons of death. If you are martially expert, like in like MMA or like, you are expert in like the art of harming other people, and you should know like these things that
The
we've learned and that we
responsibility that comes with
practiced.
that, because like,
Yeah.
yeah, like I did taekwondo for 9 years. I also did like weapons training while I was in that. But we were taught very like heavily like discipline, and this is like not something you ever use to intimidate someone. This is something that if you need it, you have these skills, you have these abilities to defend yourself, and that is it.
Yes, and that's because it's respecting the art, it's respecting yourself, and it's acknowledging that, like this is only ever the last resort.
Mm-hmm.
Never make it the first resort because you're setting a terrible precedent. Because there's people out there who are weaker than you, who
Mm-hmm.
are unable to defend themselves, and who will, have to relent if they're forced. But you shouldn't ever make force the option that the only option that's before them. Like
Mm-hmm.
diplomacy is key, and that's why I'm talking with you, not because like I want to convince you of one view or another, but because like through these talks we come to understand each other better. And yeah, there's a part of me where like when it comes to martial arts and things like boxing and sparring with friends and things, like I get enjoyment out of combat.
Of
Like
course, we all
there's
do.
no denying that for people who know me, but I don't like go pick fights. It's like that's not the purpose of it. It's because there's some sort of like mutual rivalry and enjoyment, that's an understanding that you get from it. But it's not like, hey, like I want to fight you, and like that's because I'm just hot blooded. It's like, no, like I'm talking to you because I want to know more about you, and I'm going to understand more about the
Mm-hmm.
world by taking in more viewpoints, and like being like, hey, like talk to me or I'm going to dox you, or talk to me or like I'm going to have my legions, like, which I don't have. But like it's like if
Your
you don't
harem
do
of
as I
women
say,
downstairs.
then something terrible is going to happen. Like that's I'm never going to get any true cooperation out of someone if I'm coercing them. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to get any enlightenment out of that. Like it's not good for me. It's not good for them. It's not good for anybody else because like I'm my example, no matter how small in this conversation, is going to set the precedent for other people in the world. And they'll be like, oh, like if I mistreat you in this conversation, they'll be like, oh, well, Sin treats Rex like crap, like
Mm-hmm.
so it's okay for me to treat her like crap in
Yeah.
her own stream on her own time. Like, no, like that's why I address you with respect.
Yeah.
That's why I consider what you have to say, and not just because it's your channel and because you're gracious enough to host me and listen to what I have to say, but because like our interaction shows like how adults should, like respectable adults should interact with each other. Like, yeah,
Yeah, for
we will
sure.
probably disagree on some things, but like we're adult enough to be like, hey, like I actually like talking to you, so let's keep talking. We're not going to agree on everything, and we're going to argue over some points, and maybe we'll like come away with different conclusions than we initially did. But like, we're adult enough to acknowledge our differences and treat each other with like respect. And I think that gets back to the whole idea of like that universal love. It's not like, oh, Rex, I love you, I'm in love with you, like type of stuff. But like,
Yeah.
I love
It's that like
your
like
humanity.
love in the sense of respect, like for other people,
Yes,
and
yes,
like that
because I
care
would
for
like.
other people's well-being, I think.
Yeah, and that's like golden rule, right? Like do unto others as you would want others to do unto you. That's like one of
Yeah.
the basic
You know
tenets that
what?
everybody kind of knows about,
It's
but
so interesting how much of like the really basic things you learn as a kid come back to like, you were like, oh, this is like, when you're a little kid, you're taught these like basic rules and you're like, okay. And as you become a teenager, you're like, oh, everything's more nuanced and everything's like, these rules are stupid. And then as you get a little bit older, you start to realize, oh man, these rules were really good. Cause like now I look at it and I'm like sitting here like, oh, yeah, that whole do unto others as you want done to yourself. It's like treat others the way you want to be treated kind of thing, right? Is what we all learn as kids is like don't treat other people badly if you don't want to be treated badly. But I feel like online we've lost so much of that and people are so comfortable being so nasty to each other. And I'm like, chill, like this is not the way to move people and like convince people of your positions by being like awful to them. Like you need to like sit down and talk with people like and talk to them the way you would want to be talked to if someone was trying to convince you of something, because that's going to be a lot more productive in the long run too. And it's like, do you think anyone's going to change their mind if you're screaming at them that they're a homophobic piece of shit? No. Then they're going to be like, all right, screw you, I'm going to just like continue being the way I am because like you're clearly so nice. It's like, why would I want to be like that? And so people will never like listen to like screaming and like harassment, but they will maybe listen to you if you sit down and discuss the points. Be like, hey, like, have you ever thought about like why you have these beliefs, or like, excuse me, have you ever thought about like why you are this way? And it's like that's gonna be so much more productive. But people have lost so much of that, especially in online communities. And someone said it in my chat earlier of like, it's like these people who are terminally online and think like none of this affects the real world, but it's like that's affecting your mentality towards like people who you disagree with. Like whether it be online or in the real world. Now you're going to meet people in the real world. What happens if you get into a job where you're like working with people who are like hella capitalistic, like normies, and like all of a sudden you like hate all of your coworkers because you realize that everyone's like, oh, these people are all bad people, like why are they all like this? And it's like, shit, you've like almost indoctrinated yourself so hard into like a certain ideology and forgot what the rest of the world is like, and that other people don't follow the same path as you. And now you've like terminally fucked yourself because you're like, well, I can't let go of my views, and my views say that you're a bad person. So now I have to think you're a bad person, but I kind of like you as a person, but you have bad ideas, so I can't like you.
Yeah. And I mean, like, that kind of goes up to like how you're like a person's upbringing, like nature versus nurture, blah, blah. Like, I'm not just dismissing it, but like one of the things that I learned through my own curiosity and education, I think that's really helpful for everybody, is to learn how to think critically and scientifically. Not like go be a scientist, go jump into the STEM fields. And if you're like, you know, not great at science or like mathematics, like just deal with it. But just the conceptual ability to like think critically and reason and not be like not the sense of critical is like I'm critical of your views and you're wrong, but like when I approach people who have different viewpoints, whether or not like they're on the extreme end, but like I've met people who are like, because of my appearance, like I'm passing. I can pass for a lot of different things. One of the things I joke about, and it's that I embraced, is that like there's a pretty significant amount of like a Middle Eastern community in my hometown. Mm-hmm. And when I would go out to bars, like I have this weird kind of everyman look where they would be like, "Hey brother, come sit with us." And I'm like, "Huh?" Then it's like it's all like people from the Middle Eastern community, and it's like they've like I look enough like them to where they're like, "Hey, I've never seen you before. Sit down." And we start talking. They're like, "What? I thought you were like so and so's cousin." And I'm like, "No." I'm like, I don't even know. Like maybe from like if from the Spanish when the Moors were there, maybe there's some sort of bloodline from like way back. But I'm like, cool that you guys invited me to sit down. It's like we get to talk, and like, and it's like because like they thought that I was something, but I end up being something else. But we still have the ability to connect. Like these things where I'm not like, oh, like ew, like no, I'm not like whatever you think I am, gross. Like
Yeah.
that's the wrong approach. I'm like, okay, like you had a different view of me. Like I want to like tell me about it. Like I'm interested now. Like
Yeah.
what is it that you invited me over here for? Not like accusationally, but like cool. Like what are these things? And like oh, like so how did you grow up? Like what went out? Like then that was like the experience that I had with my friend when I was studying overseas. Like when he introduced me to his Indian culture and his upbringing and like and meals and all that stuff. It's like when he was like, "Hey man," and like he's like, "Do you want to have dinner with me?" And like clearly I knew this was like not like of a romantic interest, but like because we were good friends. And I was like, yeah. I was like, absolutely. He's like, all right, we're gonna have some Indian food and we're gonna have it the way that I would have it normally with my family. And I was like, awesome. I was like, this is new to me, and like I have this curiosity where I wanted to embrace it because like I only know what my viewpoints are, and I can't expand my horizons unless I engage the way that other people see the world. And I was like, the way that I felt with like when I was like I was given this opportunity, I was like, yeah, like hell yeah, I'm embracing this. Like I feel so special right now that you would like give me the care and respect to invite you into something so personal in your life, and that I wouldn't like be like, oh, like eat with your hands. What? Like,
yeah,
I've ate with my hands before, but I ate it from a Mexican perspective, and that's the better perspective. Like that was never the approach that I took.
No, for sure. I think it's like getting yourself out of your own box. And it's like we were talking about, oh, sorry, I'm going to address the comment real quick. Tom, that's a great point about thinking scientifically and critically. The bad thing about the internet is it can really reinforce your biases. There's a Google link to just about any perspective. Yeah, I think I've talked about this with my own dad, who's like, oh, well, like, you know, science, like look at this study. And I'm like, okay, great, that's one study. You know how many studies I could find that probably go against that, and how many more studies you could probably find to go against mine? Like, it's really hard to find like because you can find a study to back up anything. It's really hard to make like that critical scientific approach to stuff, and it can reinforce your own biases. And I think that's why it's so important when we look at stuff online. Like I was always really good about when I looked at like political figures online or activist accounts, I would always like go read stories from like or like watch videos from both like conservative influencers and progressive influencers, because I always thought it was really important to get the other side of like other side's perspective, even if it wasn't something that I was going to like play into and say like, oh, I believe that. It was more just so that I'm like, what is the counter to my side? Like, what do I need to know about them that they believe, so that if I do get into like an argument, or like if I'm like talking about these things, I know what they're thinking too, right? And I think that's so important, is like, just like, if you read a scientific article that defends yours, maybe try to find a scientific article that also goes against your point, to see like what other people are saying, and like see how other people are talking about these issues, and like what other perspectives there might be on those issues. And then to Sin's point, I think I like the idea that like you push yourself outside your box. I think that's also really, especially in a world that wants to box us in so much, I think a lot of people have a tendency to box themselves in too. It's like we always put other people in boxes. I think now people are a lot of times putting themselves in a box. Like, I'm a progressive, identify as he, him, and I'm like gay, and like people want to put themselves in like, or I'm like a minority, and like people want to put themselves in all of these boxes. And again, I'm strictly talking about the left wing because I know more about it. Like, I don't want this to come off as like the left is bad, or like the left is worse than the right on this. Just the perspective that I know, it's like I'm just much more in left wing communities. But like all these people want to put themselves in like all these different boxes, and that's all they are. And it sometimes, I think that's like, it's almost more detrimental than other people putting you in boxes, because other people can say it all they want, but if you don't believe it, then you're okay. But a lot of people now are like putting themselves in boxes to the point that like, well, I'm this, this, and this, and it almost feels like that's all they are in their own eyes.
Yeah. And I mean, so one of the things, like, this isn't part of our greater discussion, but we have this issue of finding like meaning in life, right? And our meaning can come through like how we define who we are. That's a lot of like the whole idea behind sexuality, dating, and gender is identification, and the meaning in the identification. And the same with the viewpoints, is that you find meaning. So it's like, you don't ever want someone to say that your meaning is wrong, right? Like that it's meaningless. And so people will like fight and die on those hills for the sake of their beliefs. And like when they find communities who can reinforce and protect them, it's a good thing for their stance, but it's not necessarily a healthy thing for themselves or the society, especially if the viewpoint is just reinforcing what's like ill-founded or ill-informed. And there's a lot of miscommunication and misinformation that's out there that skews us. And like the one I'm talking about, like critical thinking, like, and you're an academic too, so when you get those articles, like part of the critical thinking process is like, who's paying their bills?
Yeah.
Like, so if it's something that's if it's pro pharmaceutical, and then you see like it's sponsored by Johnson and Johnson, like they're like one of this, like, well, clearly they're not going to write an article that says don't vax, when clearly like their financial contributors are the ones that are like skewing that viewpoint, because that's where the bills are being paid. Like, you have to look at things super critically, and it's like those are skills that you have to develop, and they take time. And it's not like it does come more easily to some than other, but like that problem with meaning, like that we wrestle with every day, and that I came up that I wrestle with every day. And that's why I engage you. That's why I engage anybody that like is willing to like
Have a
give me,
conversation.
like, gracious enough to give me their time. I'm like, I don't understand you, but I would like to learn your viewpoint.
Yeah. I mean, for me, that was like the whole reason I started up this channel, is like I wanted to talk to other people, and like even like people who jump in my chat and stuff. I'm like, dude, join the Discord, because I would be happy to have like conversations with anyone who's like in my chat and who comes in during my like streams, because I'm like, that's the whole point of like what I want to do here. Is like, I want to talk to people who agree with me. I want to talk to people who disagree with me. I want to talk to people who will expand my mind and like get me to look at things differently, just in general. And that was like the whole point. Just to explain, reply to some of these comments quickly. Tom says, excellent point about looking at both sides. People tend to want the shortest route to what they feel. For sure. There's thank you, 5022 for following. Yeah, I think a lot of people want, like, people want to enforce their beliefs because they feel like they're right and they don't want to be wrong. So it's like, if they can find anything that backs that up, they're like, that's it. I'm right. Look at me. Look, I have a study to prove it. And it's super easy to do that because, like, you know, you can find a study for anything. And if you can, like, use a study, then people are like, you can't discredit me because, like, look, the science backs me up. I'm supported by the science. What are you talking about?
Exactly. But what is the science, and
exactly.
Is it peer reviewed? Like, all of, like, me as an academic, I'm like, is it peer reviewed? So silly example here is like someone in my family, I won't identify who,
Yeah.
it believes in things very easily, especially when it comes to like YouTube news reporters. There was a lot of fear mongering that was going on over COVID, it being a hoax and blah blah blah. Like, don't
Yeah.
believe what the government tells you. And this person is sending me like these YouTube videos, and I'm like watching them, just like, so what is it? What is it that they believe in this person so much for? And then like I watch the video and I see what they're saying, and it's like doom is upon us, or blah blah. Like things will get out of control if you let things continue the way they are, and like their points. And then I see like these things in the background. I'm like, what are these things? And it's like a ration kit, like a
Yeah.
30-day survival. I'm like, of course they want you to be panicked about like things coming to an end, because they're trying to shill these things that are behind them to you. If you panic, you're going to buy these goods that contribute to their bottom line. Like, you're not examining the things that they're saying critically, because they're cute, or they're handsome, or you like them,
Or
or
they
they
just
agree
support
with
the
you. Like,
ideas that you already
they
had in your
have
head. Yeah.
they have an agenda here in plain sight that you're ignoring. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm not saying you're wrong, that you don't have any reason to worry, but that you need to examine the situation
Look at
more
people's
closely,
motives
because
of
they're
why
clearly
they're
trying to take
yeah.
advantage of you.
Yeah, just a couple more comments. People identify with one thing and don't want to deter from that. Rather than being like, for example, conservative and being like, I'm conservative, but I don't agree with everything my party stands for. They try to completely align with those conservatives' views 100% and justify every policy and view to themselves. Yeah, like even if something is like super like a certain like viewpoint, like some of the stuff Trump said was like totally unjustifiable. But there was a lot of conservatives who like really quickly ran to try to justify it because they're like, oh, they really support Trump and the Conservative Party, so they felt like they had to justify everything. And in reality, like, you don't have to do that. Like, just because you support one political party or one political leader over another doesn't mean you have to support everything they do. It's like, I support certain political figures, but I don't agree with, or like even political commentators, because there's not a whole lot of political figures, like real life political people that I'm like, I really like them. But like online politics, like where I'm big in, it's like there's a lot of people who I like follow and watch on Twitch and stuff, and I'm like, I really like this person, but I'm not agreeing with everything they said, because some of the stuff they say is stupid, or like I think it's stupid. Follow the money, yeah, for sure. Michelle says, I think an issue is a lot of good, credible, peer-reviewed articles are usually inaccessible to the general public or behind a paywall. Heck, even us as uni students have a hard time finding quality. Yeah, like as if, or like where I go is really good because we have a whole library like that's like online, that's like a database that you can access these things. So whenever I'm like talking about issues or when I'm looking things up, even in my general life, I can go there and like look up articles really easily. If I didn't have that, be so much harder because you type in like article headlines into like, or like try to find articles online, you're gonna get a bunch of like news report, you're gonna get a bunch of biased like op-eds and stuff like that, and it's so hard to like get around all those things and find like the original sources that these people are using. Yeah, follow the money, you'll find the real truth behind the agenda. Yeah, like I think it's just really important to like critically analyze everything and like make sure that you're knowing why people are doing the things they're doing or why they're saying the things they're saying, instead of just being like, oh, well, the science says this, so like I believe it. And it's like, it's not always the best way to analyze things because you don't know which science. Okay, I'll show you two papers on the exact same topic and they'll have exact opposite conclusions. So like it's really hard to say like, oh, I follow the science, because there's some things that are just really inconclusive. Like there's things that are pretty conclusive, like we all agree like the world is probably round, but there's still flat earthers out there. But there's other science that it's like these things are still so disputed that it's really hard to just sit there and say like, oh, well, science agrees with me. And it's like, well, the science doesn't really agree with anyone right now. We're still studying this.
Yeah, and I mean, like, and science was incorrect. Like they were in the
Yeah.
beginning of like the whole pandemic, they were like these. They're like, oh, do these things, and there's all sorts of issues that they're like, oh, like actually we were wrong, because it's just because the word science is attached to it doesn't make it factual or even relative to what's occurring. Like the science is at its best, like to put in layman's terms is an educated guess, and hopefully it's a very educated guess. Like you've done enough experimentation and enough studies to kind of almost put it to a law where it's like, if this thing happens 20 times out of 21 times, like this is the result. But like,
Yeah.
what
Well,
happens
that's why
in that one time?
just to go off that, sorry, just a quick thing, but like it's why science stopped using the word law when it came to like even laws of like physics and stuff. Even in stuff that's almost like like they're almost confident in, they will never use the word law anymore because things always change. So everything's now a theory, like theory of relativity. Like they will never use the word law again. Like we have like the laws of gravity and stuff, but I think if like we figured out gravity today, they wouldn't use that word because most science will not use the word law anymore, just because it's like we have no idea what's going to change. And even with like the laws of like physics that seems to be such like an accurate science, things are changing now because they're starting to make new discoveries because our technology is advanced. And so some of the laws that like we knew to be laws may change in the next like 20 to 30 years because we'll find out new information that actually changes like our interpretation of the world.
It does. And I'm glad that they're moving away from things like laws, because it's like when you get those things that are the exception to the rule, right? Like I think that maybe having rules is a good idea, because those are things that can be changed as more evidence presents itself. But like we have like my curiosity stems from like, yeah, maybe it was 99 times out of 100, or even 999 times out of 1,000, or even multiply that further by 10. It's like, for me, like I want to know what happened in that one.
Yeah,
like,
yeah. Where was that? What was the one outlier? What happened there?
yeah, like I want all that, like even if it's an overflow of data, even if it's ultimately just ends up being like a fluke.
Yeah.
That's where the discovery is for me. Is like what was special about this example that was different from all of the other results. And it's not that it was wrong. Like it has decided to present itself in a way that I cannot ignore it.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, no, I really like, that's why I think these discussions are also so good, because there's some things that aren't a science, and so you can't just go look up an article that like supports you. So like there's times where you're also gonna have to just discuss things and have conversations, and like that socialization piece is also really important for understanding, because like when it comes to like politics and it comes to like social change, these are things that you can't necessarily get a study on to like confirm your point. You have to talk to a large range of people and see what people think and how people are willing to change and how people are willing to grow, instead of just saying like, oh, well, the study says that this is best for society. It's like, well, it might be. So like, you remember the ethics, I think like the ethics conversation we had where we said like, you know, even if there was like a true ethical perspective out there that like somewhere in the universe that we could find, but it didn't agree with what we thought was right, would we follow it? And it's like, probably not, because it's like, if it allowed for things that we thought were wrong, we probably still wouldn't follow it, even if it was the ethical truth of the universe. And it kind of goes with the same thing for this, where it's like, this might be the best thing for society. Like this policy might be the best thing. But if 90% of society hates that policy, then you can't really say it's a good policy to implement. And so I think that's like the kind of like perspective I go at it with, is like, yeah, this could be the best thing for society, and society might not know it. But if 90% are not on board with that policy, it's not time to implement it. It's not time to bring it in. And sorry, Tom the Numb says, perfect example. Remember when they called it global warming, and every first snowfall, the objectors would crow, see, it ain't warm, and the scientists adjusted and called it climate change. Yeah, well, and the other thing with like the reason we changed to climate change is we realized that some parts of the Earth were warming really fast, and some parts were actually cooling. Like we had an inverse effect in other places. It was still extreme temperatures, but it was just in the opposite direction, and that didn't mean that it wasn't you know, it wasn't like our impact. It wasn't saying like, well, these places are getting colder, so how can it be global warming? We adjusted because we called it climate change, and we're like, well, it's still our impact, but we realize we're impacting different parts of the world in different ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I was like, Michelle said, exactly, wording and phrasing is so important to people initially grasp the topic. Yeah. I think that's, and again, to like go with that problem, if I see one more idiot on Twitter, sorry, this is going to be a little bit of a ranty section. If I see one more freaking idiot on Twitter quote like a headline of an article that I like then go and read the article, and I know you did not read the article, you just read the headline and got outraged, I'm going to lose my mind. Every person on Twitter who's like, oh, look at this article, look what's going on in like this place. And then I go and read the article and it's nothing as bad as the title, and you just got fucking clickbaited so hard and posted about the title because you're pissed and didn't read the article to the end. I'm like, I'm losing my mind. People have such a limited, people are like such a short, brain span, that, or like not brain span, the attention span, that they cannot like finish reading an article. I swear to God, that's what's happening. Or like they don't even start reading the article. They just like find the headline and they're like, great, supports my narrative, I'm going to post that. And I'm like, oh, sorry, small rant, because that shit really been pissing me off lately.
No, I get that. I get that. And that's like, so engaging with you is something that I have a very finite opportunity within my life to indulge outside of being in an academic scenario. Like to talk at someone at length about these subjects and to have a well reasoned discussion, whether or not we agree, it's rare. Like and I indulge it at every opportunity I have, and I have other people that I know of that I consider very close friends, best friends, family, but they're like few in number. Like probably can count them on both hands, both feet also if necessary. Like but it's very
It's a small
it's a
amount, yeah.
very yeah it's a very small amount. And part of that like I can't just like find something that I like. And like if I find like music that I like, easy. Like I like music, I'll post it in a music channel. Maybe someone else will like it. Easy. Like that's something that's way superficial. But when it comes to like views and what's right and wrong and ethics and politics and argument, like if I find an article that supports my view, I have to examine it before I even share it to be what are you like what is it about this article that could like where I have to like look at all of the premises that follow to the conclude like this and this mean that, and I'm like if I find error in the article myself, I'm like I can't share this.
Yeah.
Like, I've already found an issue.
No,
And then
I
have
look
to be like
stupid.
yeah, like even though I like it, if I find error in it, it's not something that I can then share with other people because then I am guilty of spreading the misinformation for the sake of my own agenda.
Yeah, no. Michelle's like, my girl is one in a million. I can't hold a conversation with her. That's not true. When it comes to like psych stuff, she's really good. She's like on social and psych stuff. Michelle's great. She is very intelligent, very smart. I just don't think that we talked about this at the very beginning of the stream. Most people in my life cannot keep up with how much I want to talk about this stuff, which is why I started the stream, because I was like, I'll find other people who want to talk about this stuff all the time. And I can like meet people who want to talk about this stuff all the time. And that's kind of what I'm here for. So but I think I've even had like articles like kind of to your point is like I've had articles sent to me by like family members and stuff. Like I said, my family's very political, very debatey with each other, and I'll be like, I will read through the article and then pick it apart and be like, did you read to the last sentence? Did you read to this part? And I'm like, here's the part that contradicts the title, and here's the part that agrees with it. So like, be really careful like what you get from this article. Like read it through and be really critical of what you read, because. And again, I've read through like articles that I'm like, how can this article state both of these things at the same time? Like it's contradicting itself, but it'll put the part that agrees with like the narrative and the title at the top and hopes that people won't follow all the way to the bottom and find like the actual like study that they pulled from and find that like the conclusion might have actually been a little different than what they're reporting. I think that's like super one of the big issues I have with like especially op-ed pieces on like news sites now is like opinion pieces have become really popular and people will cite them.
Goodness.
People cite op-eds as if they're like news stories, and I'm like, okay, read the top. It says op-ed. This is not like a credible citation. This is just someone writing an opinion piece, and like they're just getting paid to write their opinion, right? Like be really careful with what you cite. And people are like, oh, but it's on a news website. It's like on Washington Post. I'm like, great. Washington Post hires people to write opinion pieces. There is a section of their site made for op-eds. Really, again, be careful. Are you reading something that's like a credited source, or are you reading something that's an op-ed? Yeah.
Right.
I could go on about these like type of things forever. I've done like 3 or 4 research courses. Like both of my fields are like really research heavy, and like so I'm like really hypercritical of people who like just pull things out of their ass. Cause I'm like, I will catch you if there's something with statistics or something with like research. I will catch you so fast. Because most people have no idea what they're talking about when it comes to those two topics. And if you're someone who's been to like university and taken like 1 or 2 research courses or a statistics class, you will realize how dim most of the and it's not by their own fault because most people don't have access to like this education, but you will realize how dim most of the population is when it comes to like research and statistics, because no one knows how to understand these things in most senses.
And again, like, so I tend to reference my mod Pixie a lot, and she's also not just a mod. She's one of my best and closest friends in the like we're in an online community. We play Final Fantasy 14 together. That's how we met.
Yeah.
And I'm very close with her and her free company, which is like the association in the game where people join and hang out and do stuff together, and those people are all dear to me too. She's an educator, And like that's one of the things that like they have to like they're trying to make a paradigm shift towards is more critical thinking. And that is like, and it's not like, hey, like again, like not just throwing kids into STEM fields and being like sink or swim, but like the concept, right? It's because like it's there's this whole notion of like you just do as you're told, right? And that's like you teach to the test, like was the old method. But that you get results, right? Like quantifiable results and hard numbers, but that doesn't mean that people are actually learning anything.
Yeah.
And it's like it's flipping over finally. They're like, well, like what if they want to learn about things? Like they used to be like, don't like be, like children should be seen and not heard. Like, well, if they ask why and they're not just being trolls about it, like why? But they're genuinely inquisitive, then indulge that curiosity. Be like,
Yeah.
if you're really interested, then we'll talk about it. And I'll share everything that I understand about it. And maybe you as a kid even have some weird insights that I'll be like, huh. Like,
Oh
I
my
didn't
God, yeah.
think
Kids
about
will
it
say the
like that.
craziest thing, and then you're thinking about it for like 7 days because you're like, oh my God. Kids are crazy.
But yeah, like that's the approach is like there needs to be more of an effort towards like the concept of critical thinking that there's a formula that's easy to follow rather than like, and it doesn't mean that you're going to get to the right answer, but what it does encourage is that you're thinking about it.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's like the most important thing is like getting. I don't know if I talked about this with you or somebody else about the education system and this idea of like we're teaching kids what to think and not how to think. And I think that's finally changing of like we're trying to like teach kids how to think and how to learn rather than just teaching them like what they need to know, right, for an exam or a test. And I think that's like super important. Tom the Num says, a family member I love and respect unconditionally told me recently that no one's died from Omicron. I didn't know where to begin and my brain literally shorted out. Yeah, see, like that's like the heavy level of a conspiracy the other way where it's like, oh, well, like, you know, the pandemic's a hoax or like, no, you know, the death count wasn't that high, which like, you know, arguably like because people died with and from COVID, that whole debate is like really interesting to me just from a scientific point of view. But yeah, like the people who are like, oh, like, you know, like they're lying to you, the vaccine's going to kill you, no one died from Omicron, like those type of conspiracies. It's like you see how much like, again, this idea of like echo chambers online, people will find stuff that like supports them. They'll find influencers who support their ideas. They'll find articles that support their ideas, and they'll just listen to that. And on the other side, it's like people who are like, you know, who are like, oh, like, you know, this is going to be the end of the world. Like, if we open up, we're going to all die. Like, the government's just wanting to kill us and they only care about the economy more than they care about human. It's like, okay, no, like, the economy is also really important to a lot of people. And if the economy shuts down, a lot of people are going to die not from like Corona itself, but probably from economic situations and like social situations that are probably going to push them to the brink. And now we're gonna have a lot of deaths on this side because of like a whole other issue. So like when we talk about opening up the economy, there's a necessity for that on like a different spectrum in terms of lives lost as well. Like and I think people are like really quick to like, and these people are really quick to like dismiss you being like, oh, you don't care about people and you just care about money and stuff like that. And it's like, no, like people get really extreme on both sides, and that's all they can like listen to is like people who like absolutely support their narrative. It was, sorry, I was just gonna read the last comment. It was so hard not to start of saying, "Are you fucking crazy?" I stopped, took a few breaths, and asked where they got the information. We delved into it, but it was such an uphill climb. Yeah, but that's the important part is that you did get engaged in that conversation and didn't just like shut her down and be like, "You're fucking crazy. Shut up." You were like, "Hey, let's talk about this," and I think that's super important. Even if like people like who are extreme opposite beliefs of you, it's like that willingness to have a conversation with them, even if you can't change their mind, if you could just make them think a little bit, I think is really good.
And going off of that, like, so the one thing, like, there are a lot of like hoaxes and conspiracies out there about like this, what we're experiencing, this pandemic being like not real, but like people, like we're still learning about what this thing is. And it's evolving, and it seems like, at least from what I've witnessed, and I've had like one of my uncles lost his brother, not directly to it, but as a result, because he ended up like coming down with something else due to a prior a prior health condition. And then like as he was down, then he also got hit by that. So it's like it comes in and it's like a supplementary disease. So it's like, oh, like you're already weak and immobile. Well, this is a good time to hit you with pneumonia. And
Yeah.
then he passed away from like the COVID induced pneumonia. But like, if he had not had those prior conditions that affected him, he
Yeah.
probably would have had a better chance of fighting it off. But like, the way the disease worked is that it saw that he was like, in a sense, saw that he was already compromised, and
Yeah.
was like, well, it's just gonna add another hit while you're down, and that was the hit that did him in.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like always like that compounding factor event is like, well, if he didn't have the pre-existing conditions, he might have been okay and not gotten corona. Well, even if he got corona, he might not have gotten pneumonia, but then the pneumonia finally kicked in and like that killed him. So it's like a whole bunch of steps to like get there, and like it's still like any of these things probably if you had stopped at any one of these steps or like taken any one of these steps out, he might have been okay, but it's like that compounding effect of like most people are in a lot of bad situations and like will have issues like fighting this off because like other things will kick in or like pre-existing conditions will come to the surface and like fuck you up, and like it's super sad to like see situations like that. Yeah, but yeah, it's just really sad to see that everything's that happened over the last 2 years, not only like in death counts and hospitalizations and people who've been like really affected by the virus itself, but I think like all the fallout, like the negative like fallouts that have come from this, like the idea of like people being like so much more politically divided, and the fact that this was the thing that politically like drove like a really hard wedge between communities, and then like the idea that like we really screwed a lot of people economically and like socially, like obviously like here where I am, like we had more drug overdose deaths in the last year than we did COVID deaths, which is like how the hell did we let that one slip through? Like we prevented COVID deaths, but we let like more people die from drug overdoses than we did COVID. And it's like, man, we really dropped the ball there too, right? And like this like pandemic is like both exposed me to a lot of like, I think it's just exposed me to a lot of the bad in our society that I probably like wouldn't have known was that bad unless this happened. And it sucks that this is the thing that exposed all these like issues in our society or exasperated them to an extent. Oh, Sin?
Yes,
Oh,
yes, I'm here.
okay.
Go. Sorry, I had got distracted for a moment. Can you restate that point for me, please?
Oh yeah, no worries. I was just saying, like, I think like the everything about Corona, like the whole pandemic, has like really like messed up my view of like the world and society. Because I think like so much of the bad in our society that I wouldn't have known about was like either shown by or like exasperated by the pandemic, and like whether it be like extremist in like beliefs and people or like the things that we let slip in society, like where I am, like I said, like we had more drug overdose deaths than we did corona deaths, and it's like how did we like focus so much on COVID, but we let all these people who were struggling with like drug addiction like then slip through the cracks because we were so focused on this one thing.
Yeah.
And it shows that like the inability to focus more than one thing in a society at a time. Like we can either focus on COVID or we can focus on something else, but we can't do both, and that's really, I think that's really sad to me.
Yes. So our attention is definitely. So we touched down on this. Like the COVID definitely. The whole global pandemic has definitely skewed our attention, right? And then we referenced like the whole idea between like the government's interaction and interference and overstepping. But then we got onto the subject last time of like the crisis at the border of the Ukraine, and we came to the agreement that like if like shit hit the fan there, so to speak, but a lot of this COVID, the things that dictate our lives with this particular like issue with the pandemic and with the disease will suddenly become probably way less relevant, right? And that right now this is the focus is also leading to your point is that other things are going unnoticed and untreated because the focus is so intent on like how do we deal with this one thing, and there are other issues like keeping people locked up in their like we see this with animals. Like when you put animals in cages at zoos, they're like, oh man, these animals are crazy. They're so violent and like throwing their feces at us and attacking the trainers. It's like they're in jail and they're going crazy. People go crazy in jails. We see this. You're essentially telling people you can't leave, and they're going crazy, and they're and not like in terms of like, oh, they're insane, but like they're stir crazy, right? So they're like, oh, I got alcohol, I have drugs, I have injectables, like, and I have all this time and I'm not doing anything else. So why
I'm
don't I
isolated,
just,
I'm alone, I'm sad, I like don't
yeah,
know what else to do with my time.
Yeah. And then they just start using and using more. And then like eventually like you get to the point of overdose because you're like, man, I'm not feeling anything anymore. Better take more.
Or you
Not
get
feeling
like one
anything
bad
anymore.
strain, like, like you've been going to this dealer for
Yeah.
a while and they've been not, you've gotten clean stuff, and all of a sudden you get that one bad pill and
One
like you're
bad pill and
gone. And like
fentanyl's killing people like crazy because of
fentanyl's
that
like the
cut.
big one, like like everything's laced right now. And like, thank God in Canada we legalized weed, so if you want weed, you can go to like a dispensary and get like clean, safe weed here. So that's super nice. And I wish that was a thing in more places, because like I am pro legalize all drugs and just set up like clinics where people can get clean, because it seems to work in a lot of other places where they do that. But that's a whole nother, maybe we can have that conversation another day with like law and drugs and all that type of stuff. I think that'd be a fun one. But yeah, I think like yeah, like this whole pandemic has led people to like pick really bad paths to like cope, if nothing, if that's the best way to say it.
Yes. But yeah, like that's we're very well distracted from other things that matter. And like so one of the things that I really appreciate about you inviting me to have this conversation about the original topic of sexuality and dating is that you're taking time like out of your day and out of your schedule for us to talk about something that might not be getting the attention that like in any other circumstance. And granted, we have right now a very small but dedicated base and interact. Like I see your chat is just like blue, it blows up. Like the community may be I don't want to say, but I'm looking for a word. It's a very intimate community,
Yeah.
and they're very active, and we're engaging in a topic that isn't something that like the mainstream media is entertaining. It's looking at other things, and we're bringing attention to something that like people may have a vested interest. Like they're like thank you so much. Like this is so refreshing. Like we're actually talking about something else. People have the courage to talk about something else and want to talk about something else. And that's like whenever you bring these things up and you're like you throw topics at me, I'm like, yeah, like let's talk about these things because what you bring up aren't necessarily things that are like being thrown at us and like always in the limelight. We're
Yeah.
talking about deeper subjects that like kind of get us off into the weeds, and I appreciate that. And I think that I hope that those who are here listening to us ramble on also appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate like people sticking around too, because like I know I try to pick topics that are interesting to like the general like community and to like people like who are interested in like social issues. I try to like keep it like somewhat engaging. Like there's stuff that I really want to talk about. Like today, like I like had a conversation with some friends about like the dating scene and stuff like that and how hard it is. And I'm like, this would actually be a really good topic because I think a lot of people want to hear. And obviously we dive into, we tend to tangent a lot. We've ended up here. But like even just that like whole socialization we talked about, like this topic still kind of goes with it, that like how media and social media and our engagement with it has like destroyed our ability to socialize with other people and engage with people who we don't agree with. But yeah, I think like I like the idea of like fostering a community that wants to be really actively engaged in these conversations. And that's why I like set up the Discord, because I wasn't originally going to set up a Discord. I was like, oh, I'll just stream and like people come listen to me talk. But then the more I thought about it, I was like, actually, maybe a Discord would be good, because I like want people to like come and talk to me and like want people to like, come and engage me and be like, hey, I like heard you say something on stream and like I want to talk about it. Or it's like, hey, I'd be down to have like a conversation on stream and like, hey, let's pick a topic and like talk about it, because I think that's really fun. And I really enjoy that process. And I don't really care if people disagree with me or agree with me, or if they want to fight about something. I'm like, I'm down to do it all. I'm quite fiery, but I can also have really chill conversations like this. So like whatever people want to do, I'm about it.
Yeah, so am I. And like when we talk, we have like I always look at the time, and not to keep time, but
Yeah.
because of how much that I'm enjoying it, and I'm like, how did 3 hours
I
get
know it's
away
been
from
three
us? Like
hours
like
now.
just
We've
like
like
that, right?
ran through it.
It's so fun. And I learned so much, and I come to understand myself better, and you and your community better, and that we can continue to grow and build this thing. Like I would really like to uh, make like continue this being as long as your schedule allows, because I find it engaging and enjoyable, and hopefully our voices can reach more people.
Absolutely. No, for sure. It has been 3 hours though, so I think this is usually a 3 hour thing. So I will let you go if you're at that point. I will probably stay on stream for anyone in the chat who wants to like talk to me about this for a little bit longer. I'll probably stay on for another half an hour to an hour just to talk to chat for a bit. But I will let you go as to not keep you up super late into the night.
Yeah. So again, if I may share myself,
Oh,
my
absolutely.
name my name is Sin Fatalis. I'm just gonna do this little. That's a little high to chat. So that's me. That's the person that's speaking to Rex. And every Friday, as long as she's available, we'll be here on her channel here speaking about interesting topics, and I hope you continue to come back. Tell your friends about it. Tell your friends about Rex within like whatever scope you have. So your own social media, like never go into someone else's stream and be like, hey, like come over here instead.
Yeah.
But
Please don't do that to people.
yeah, don't do that. But anything that you have within your own power to be able to share these conversations with people, and I believe she uploads these to YouTube as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I would like to see her community grow. I would like to continue for us to have these conversations, for more people to be included, and I'm really grateful that she's taken the opportunity to allow me her time and access to her community as as I am here. So again, thank you for having me, Rex. Thank you for everybody who's been participating in chat, and I hope you all have an enjoyable evening. And with any fortune and fair weather, we will see you all again on Friday. Enjoy your night, Rex, and have fun with your community.
You too. Thanks for coming out tonight. Everyone, please go follow his channel. He does Final Fantasy streams and Dead by Daylight, and he will also have conversation over there. If you go jump in the chat, he loves to talk to people. His streams are super entertaining, and he's got a great voice to listen to. I watch his streams while I study because he's got a great voice. So even if just for that, just go hit him up. He's awesome.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Good night. All right. Now it's just us in the chat. Oh, and of course I mess up immediately. There we go. Let me go through some of these comments quickly because obviously I was ignoring you guys just for the outro there. Let's see. Where did I last see? Let's see. This is honestly my first time here. This is great. You should have a podcast, but I truly think the current generation with their short attention span of 30 seconds wouldn't get into it. I'm extremely generous with that amount of time. Roast me. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm pretty young and I have a short attention span. I don't know how people listen to me. But I also just like to talk a lot. So I think sometimes if you're talking fast enough, people will keep their interest. I hope. I have more faith in the next generation. They're pretty sick of the scheme. Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. I think that's why I wanted to start this stream, because I think podcasts are harder to start up, like to get like a voice on like some type of platform, whereas Twitch is like a really easy, like if you're just a normie person to just get into and talk to people. So I wanted to like do this because I'm like, I really wanted to like talk about things I was passionate about, and these are things I'm passionate about, and I like engaged into the politics community at large on Twitch, and I kept seeing people who I'd get really like mad at for like, I was like, oh, how can people like be this stupid, and how can people engage in this way and like not see like their own like biases? And I was like, you know what? I'm like, there's a really good opportunity because there's such a small section of streamers who I'm like, these people are really good at seeing both sides and being good debaters and being good people who like argue with people in a way that's like actually productive. And I'm like, I think there's like a good place to like jump into that like scene and like find people who like also want to like talk about things in a nuanced way and just talk about different topics that like you might not get to talk about in other places. So like I'm really enjoying it here. Yeah, if anyone else has any other questions for like things we've talked about or things you want to talk about, let's see, definitely a voice for a radio podcast. Oh, Sin, absolutely. Oh my God, what a voice, eh? Everyone in my community, because of one of my friends who called him Optimus Prime, he's designated Optimus Prime voice in our group. So, great voice. Do you ever feel imposter syndrome in reference to your voice, like it carries you in some sense? Oh, dang. Did anyone else watch, you know when Among Us was really big, and there was that one guy named, oh God, what was his name? Oh, I'm not even gonna remember. Corpse Husband, that guy, and he had like the super deep voice, and his like follower count went through the roof because his voice was just so like, everyone was just in love with this guy's voice. No one knew what he looked like, but he had like this great voice, and everyone was just like constantly in his streams because they're like wanted to listen to him talk. Yeah. Not that that's the only reason people watch Sin. I'm not trying to say that. Sin is very entertaining on his own. But I'm just saying, he's got a good voice. It probably draws people in a little bit. Yeah, for anyone who's joined. Michelle, are you still up? I think I've had a couple people join the Discord, which is awesome. Um, a good voice is just damn strong, like any other powerful trait, for sure. Um, I don't know what my powerful trait is yet. Maybe my hair colors. Maybe that'll be my thing. I dye my hair every 6 months. That's gonna have to be my thing. It's the only thing that gets me views. I hope not. I hope people watch me for more things than just how I look. Though it seems like people have been pretty like engaged throughout this whole conversation, which I really appreciate from all of you. Sin is our corpse. Actually, like Sin is actually our corpse husband. Anybody, my videos with him, and I think it's because it's like the long form discussion. So as soon as people jump in, they get really engaged in the conversation. But sometimes I'm just like, Sin's in here, and people are just like, oh, that's a nice voice. I'm gonna sit in here and talk. Adds to the experience. Yeah. Um, let's see. Well, if no one else is like super into chatting right now, I might end stream here for the night. And if you want to message me about stuff, you can do it in my Discord. My Discord is linked below. You guys can click that. I also have a Twitter down there. I don't really use Twitter that much, so I don't need you to follow me on that. But if you want to, go nuts. But I haven't really tweeted anything. JK, you're stellar boobs. Thanks, Michelle. Appreciate it. But yeah, go join the Discord. We can talk in there. You can message me in there. Give me ideas for future streams, either with me and Sin, or if you want to talk to me on stream, off stream, I am down always to have chats. I do go to university, so I'm not always super on top of being like active in my Discord, but if you message me in there, I will reply. But yeah, so I think that's it for tonight. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here. Thanks for hanging out. I will be back probably Sunday night, if not Monday night. So, and every Friday I do streams with Sin, so the long form discussions, if you really enjoyed that, happens every Friday night at the same time, 9 p.m. I want to say PST. I think we're PST. I always get it confused, so don't judge me. But yeah, it's always the same time every Friday night, so come back and join us.